Good evening, board members. It is a pleasure to have you here this evening for our Fall 2024 Board Prioritization meeting. As we're pulling up the agenda, just wanted to kind of go through a little bit of kind of what we had planned for this evening to facilitate this discussion. Heather, I don't know if you had a board check-in, just see how everybody's feeling. If you do, or if you don't, or if the board wants to skip over that, that's completely, yeah. And then we'd go into a group discussion. I know that there's been a lot of discussions over the past several months as we've been onboarding our new board members and some existing board members around the ways that we meet. Is there ways that we could make that more efficient, change that, shift that around? And Heather's going to lead that conversation. Then we'll go through the agenda setting items, and we've got really 3 categories. I appreciate everybody doing the prioritization. I think that's one data point. We'll take that information, combine it with some of the staff prioritized work that is some of that work was prioritized from previous boards that staff is continuing to work on. Some of this is from staff thinking that they need some reports out to the public. And then there's those things that are just Board of Education priorities we can talk about. And then areas where I feel like there's overlap on both, that there was some staff priority and Board of Education priority. And I've already preloaded some things that I think are on our big priorities. I could talk to you about that when we get there. But this is different for the public that's watching. This is different than other processes we've had where the board comes fully loaded and then we shift and adjust. We're actually going to be using the prioritization process we went through to actually build what this looks like. So it's a little bit different, I think similar ideas, but more discussion around some of those topics. And so that's the plan for today. And we're lucky, as always, for our prioritization meeting to have Heather Bergman with us, who's an expert facilitator, does lots of work in our community and other communities across the state of Colorado. And this is her 3rd meeting today. So congrats to Heather for still standing. And with that, I'll turn the presentation over to you.
Well, you know, okay, so we are going to do a board check-in today. So if we could go around, I'd like to hear 2 things from each of you. One is, tell me one thing that the board has done or addressed in the last, so since you've been on the board or in the last year, whichever you prefer, that you're most pleased or most proud, most excited about. And then the second thing, because you know I love it when we check in with our humanity and see each other as people and not just as colleagues on the board, I would like to know about the best in-person music concert you've ever been to. Nah. I know you didn't see that one coming. I'm full of surprises. I will take volunteers. Who would like to go first for my 2 things? Kitty was ready, but her mouth is full. Who's going to go first?
I can start.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nicole.
Thanks for this great opener, Heather. I think what comes to top of mind for me is the way in which we are addressing declining enrollment. There have been multiple articles in the press this week about how our neighbors have been addressing or have attempted to address declining enrollment. And I think that's something that we should feel really proud of, how we continue to talk with our community about the realities of declining enrollment in our city, state, nation, and how we are working to collect their feedback in making any of those changes. I'm also really excited about the work we're starting with graduation requirements. I think that will have a tremendous impact on our students, and I think it aligns very well with our strategic plan. So I'm excited to see, I'm excited that we took that work on, and I'm excited to see where it goes. The concert that comes to mind was, for me, Eddie Vedder, Second Row Telluride Bluegrass Festival. It was insane, beautiful venue, right up front. He talked to the crowd a lot and they sang their heart out. So for me, that's the one that came to mind first.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Oh gosh. The pandemic ruins my years. I would probably say 2017.
Oh, wow.
Right after that movie came out where he did the songs Into the Wild, when he did all those songs, and the family was there. The family of the kiddo, they were there. So that was also really cool.
Extra shrew. Awesome. All right, who's next? Oh, great, Kitty's ready.
I finished chewing. Okay. So, easy, best thing we've ever done since I've been on the board, Dr. Anderson, by hiring him, because we would not have been doing, well, I can't say what we wouldn't have done, but the great stuff that we've been doing under him may not have happened or happened as smoothly. So, yeah, that's an easy one. I don't know if I can tell you the best concert, but I can tell you one that was memorable for a couple of reasons. And it was 1985, and it was the Boulder Bach Festival singing the St. John Passion. And it was we had just moved here, and it was our first time at Mackey. And those seats were the most horrible, uncomfortable seats I have ever sat in. And when we arrived at the concert, we saw people carrying pillows. And I wondered, why are people carrying pillows? Well, since then they've replaced the seats, but yeah, that was an excellent performance.
Thanks, Kitty. All right, Beth's ready.
It's hard to follow you guys with these great stories. I'm going to second what Nicole said. I think our response to declining enrollment is excellent. I'm feeling really good about the work we're doing with the community. I like our community engagement process. I constantly read headlines from other school districts around the state, consolidation and closure, and a lot of like future feelings around fear in the environment. And I think we are not doing that. I think we're doing a really good job of responding to a difficult situation. And I'm really proud of that work. I don't go to a lot of concerts in person. It's not usually a priority for me, but I did, like so many people, go to Taylor Swift last summer, very last second. Some mom friends of mine had a last minute ticket, and she sold it to me at face value. It was nosebleeds. It was $125. I did not pay thousands of dollars to see Taylor Swift, and it was so much fun. Like, I had a total blast. She was tiny in the bottom of the stage, but it was just the energy being there it was incredible. I like Taylor Swift, but admittedly, I am getting a little Taylor Swift fatigue these days. Here we are all these months later, but it was a total blast. So
That's a good one. All right, next. Oh.
I've enjoyed the work we've done on policy. I feel like we've gotten through a lot, and I think that it shows the functionality and the preparedness of our board. So I've enjoyed that. I could never pick my favorite live music concert because I love that so much. So I'm just going to go with my most recent one, which is I went to see Nathaniel Rateliff with the Colorado Symphony Orchestra, and it was really, really beautiful.
That's terrific. All right, can you beat that?
Have asked me, like, what have you guys accomplished? What are the big things? And it's hard to pinpoint. And so I think kind of getting back to what Lelania said of just like making small but significant progress on a lot of little things that I think will have a big impact in the coming years. And so it's not big headline stuff, but it's kind of the important kind of small methodical work of boards. And so that's been something I've really enjoyed. Best concert, same thing. I've had a lot of good ones. I think maybe a full circle concert. I saw Green Day at the Fox Theater in Oakland, which is a really small venue in like the 1997 maybe, and so they weren't huge. And I'm going to take my 11-year-old and 8-year-old, which maybe is bad parenting, to see Green Day this fall at Fiddler's Green, I think. Or no, actually they're at Coors Theater. So that's kind of a cool, also like makes you feel really old and full circle moment of seeing Green Day as a 20-year-old and then taking my kids, something 30 years later. So
Very good. Excellent. All right. Eeny, meeny, miny, Jorge.
It's funny. I think Jason actually took my concert. I saw Green Day in upstate New York, and it was an amazing show. It was a lot of fun in the 90s. So I'm going to go with a different show in the 90s. It was an outdoor concert. It was a free concert in downtown Albany. I don't know how many thousand people were there. it was Eddie Money.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, Eddie Money, 80s singer, and he killed it. It was like an amazing show. It was just, it was a free show. The whole community came out, and it was just wonderful to see and be a part of that. So that was a lot of fun. So we'll be with that part of it. Like everybody else, I think it's the stuff we've done with enrollment and policy has been great. I think this is not so much what we've done, but kind of where we're headed as we think about strategic plan. I see us investing in that direction and continue to address those priorities because we haven't gotten there yet. And I see us moving forward in that direction. So I'm excited about that.
Excellent. Last but not least.
I'm also excited about the whole body of policy work that we've done together and really impressed by the ability to problem solve and come out with solutions in principle that should drive things going forward for a while. So I'm really proud of our collective work on that. Concert-wise, I'm torn. Experience-wise, seeing Yo-Yo Ma do all the Bach cello stuff in the National Cathedral is pretty magical. If it weren't for how loud the darn chairs are for 1,000 people enjoying. Otherwise, I would, again, yeah, the bad chair, but Yo-Yo in that much resonance, one person playing unamplified. That's pretty amazing.
Amazing. Excellent. All right, y'all have to participate. Oh, just see Kathleen's eye. She was like, what the heck?
I'll go, Kathleen, to give you a second to think.
Talk slowly.
I've really just enjoyed getting to know this board, work with everyone. Something that's just top of mind for me is the work that we've been doing with Grad Plus, only because at the graduation ceremonies that we've been going to, you have a lot of kids who have a lot of chords, right? And then a lot of kids who have these Grad Plus medals who wouldn't have gotten acknowledged for taking a college credit, getting sealed by literacy, getting work-based experience, industry certifications. They're wearing them with pride at a couple of the ceremonies at Broomfield and at Fairview. It was actually a part of the ceremony. That wasn't anything that we had kind of decided. I just shared with our team, we should do something to recognize all of the kids so we could see. And when they said everybody who achieved a Grad Plus credential, I think every kid at Fairview High School stood up. Like literally every kid. And at Broomfield High last night, it was almost the same exact thing. So, it's tricky sometimes, I think, when you work on a governance team, how do you see your fingerprints on the work? And for me, it was just super, super clear. Like the work that we're doing around Grad Plus is working. It's embedded in our schools. Folks know about it. They're excited about it. So that for me is top of mind. Concert, I love live music. If I'm thinking an old school concert, Guns N' Roses, Metallica at the Orlando Citrus Bowl in 1993 was awesome. But recently, because when I lived in Atlanta, we became friends with a guy. He's actually stage manager for Zach Brown Band. So anytime they roll into town, he kind of gives us some nice seats. And so they had a great show at Fiddler's Green. But the best show that I've seen is they played at Coors Field pre-pandemic Owl Tour. It was unbelievable.
Wow.
Devil Went Down to Georgia. I mean, it was wonderful. So a little
Thanks.
maybe over-answered that last one. That's a good question.
All right, Kathleen.
I'm proud of a lot of things in this district. Working with this board, obviously, is a real privilege. And I do feel like we've done some great policy work and being able to honestly, this time of year, appreciate all the wonderful things that the teachers and every individual in this district does for our students is really, it's amazing. So I may not be at those graduation ceremonies, but I'm there in spirit. I also love live music, so I'll give you two. Radiohead at Stone Mountain Park outside in Georgia in the 90s in the pouring rain. Amazing. And then last summer I discovered a venue here. I hope not many people are watching, but the Mishawaka in the Poudre Canyon. Have you ever been?
Yeah.
It is magic, especially if you love the band. So saw one of my favorite bands there last summer. It's a true bit of Colorado if you haven't been.
So fun. Laura, you want to play?
Sure. I think one of the teach me how to do this. I think one of my best experiences every other year is meeting new board or people who are going to become new board members and kind of explaining to them the ropes, how the district works, how becoming a board member is. And I get to meet the candidates before anybody else does. And it's really special. I have that one-on-one time with them. So it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to the board and to your first prioritization session. So that's one of the things I'm most proud of. And then one of the best concerts I've been to in recent times was Nitty Gritty Dirt Band at Red Rocks. I guess I'm a hillbilly down.
I love
it. Yeah, so that would be it.
Excellent. Fantastic. All right.
Can I share one thing? Because
Yes.
it's timely and so many board members brought up policy. I happened to ask Kathleen in this school year, how many policies the board has done this whole school year. So previous board and then this. The board has reviewed and revised 40 policies and retired 22. So the board has touched 62 policies in the 23-24 school year, which is a lot. So thank you for doing that work.
Yeah.
I don't, but I will find out. And I will say there's a lot of board work in those numbers because that's what we actually adopted. It's not how often the board talked about it because there were a lot of study and work sessions that went into that. So
Amazing.
kudos to you.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'm going to answer my own questions in reverse order, which is a gateway into the next thing. So I'm a Denver native, and when I was 14 years old, I got the little sister free pass to my brother's first concert, which was Robert Plant and Joan Jett at Red Rocks. And Joan Jett opened for Robert Plant. But as a 14-year-old girl watching Joan Jett, like that is a life-changing event. And it's, been a couple of years. And I remember it so clearly. Just what an amazing, amazing show. She's amazing. And for, I don't live in your district. So my primary exposure to you all is during these events. And I really appreciate that everyone made time to visit with me. And as a parent in any school district, just to hear how much y'all care about what the district does. Everyone talked about how important it is to do right by the students and right by the staff, and really, really gives just a person hope. Like, we're going to be okay, America. We got this. Everything, it's going to be okay. So thank you for that. Moving into our next agenda item. Nope, go back. You can just sit here for a minute.
Yeah, well, I've got a slide for that.
Oh, you have a slide for that? I forgot. Okay, never mind. Do what he said. Yeah.
I'm going to skip through the vision, mission, values, and long-term student outcomes. I know that we have these typically ground, but I think everybody knows, and we've talked a lot about this. So to set up the conversation around current board meeting structures, here's the structure, Heather. I think you know this, but just for the public and everybody to understand. We have 3 meetings a month. They all happen on Tuesday evenings. Within those 3 meetings, we typically have 2 business meetings and then a work session meeting. Within the 2 business meetings, we have information sharing opportunities, which is 1 or 2 topics per meeting, depending upon the length. We have 3 work session opportunities, which is one right now, 1 day, which is all work session. And then we work in our work sessions before our business meetings. There are 2 public comment opportunities per month. And then for the business of the district, there's 2 opportunities for staff to bring forward items to either put on the consent agenda or to study and then move to action per month. And then we currently schedule executive sessions on an as-needed basis. There's not like a clear rhythm to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we think about our meeting structures, right, there's 3 Tuesday evenings, and within those 3 Tuesday evenings today, we do all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you so much. So when I was visiting with each one of you, I said, I've heard that there is some interest among some to revisit and maybe revise the meeting structure. What do you think about that? And roughly my summary is there is a majority of the board who is at least open to rethinking about the structure. So we should talk about it. What I heard was the primary focus of any revision might want to be this third meeting of the month. That for many folks, being away from your people for that third night is a lot. So then I said, well, okay, what shall we do with that meeting time? Do you want to just stop meeting quite so much and just not have those meeting hours? And most of you said, oh, no, that's not what I'm suggesting at all. Okay, then where would we put that meeting time? And I sort of heard three versions. One is tack it on to existing meetings and make them longer. I don't really want to meet until late, but I'd rather meet fewer times later. Then I also heard, what if we stuck with the third meeting, but didn't do it every month? Did it like every other month? And then I heard a third version, which is what if we collected all of those topics and quarterly or maybe every other monthly did like a more compact session, just focus on that. And maybe that would be during the day. So these are the ideas that I have heard. The reason why we put this first is to the extent this potentially influences the number of meeting hours that you have or where they might fall in a schedule, we kind of need to know what's the nature of the schedule that we're filling with our priorities first so we can get after that work. So what I would love to hear, now that you sort of know the range of what your colleagues around the table have said, does anyone think they know what the right answer is? Yes, ma'am.
So I am not yet convinced we need to change anything.
Sure.
So questions I want to ask is, for anything that folks want to change, what problem are we solving by making this change? Because if there isn't a problem to be solved, then why would we do it? Another comment is I know, because before you all were elected, you were involved, you came to board meetings, so nobody can be surprised by when we meet and how much we meet. So it can't be wow, I had no idea, I can't do all of this. And that's for any change we make structurally, is looking at what's the problem to be solved. Because since I've been on the board, we've been a very high functioning board. And that, I know Rob can testify to that people are jealous. And so we have not always had that in this district. We have had times when the board was, or at least some board members were very micromanaging. I would suggest, if you think that's a good idea, is check in with staff who had to live through that and see what they think of it and how that impacts their job. But I think the biggest piece is, what problem are we solving by doing this? And if we're solving a personal problem, I don't think that's a problem that the board needs to settle. If we're solving a problem that affects the district, the kids, the way we do, what we do, the impact we have on our students and achievement, then that's what we're supposed to do. So I would say that we definitely want to look at things that do that.
Okay. Love to hear other folks' thoughts. Again, focusing on what shall we do? Who would like to make a proposal? The no action alternative is, of course, a viable choice. What do you guys think? Yep, go ahead.
I thank you, Kitty, for starting off that way. I think those are all good questions to ask. I think, some of the three kind of options on the table, I think back to some of the meetings we've had this, while we've been on the board, or this version of the board. The regular meetings, it's impossible to see how we could tack on any time to that. Those go, last Tuesday we were here till 11 o'clock, and But there have been a few work sessions, the third Tuesday, I guess you could call it, where I actually did really remember a few times walking out and the sun is still out. And so it's, 7:30, 8 o'clock. And my preference is not that it's a surprise. We all know what we're getting into. We're not trying to, I don't want it to kind of our own family obligations and commitments or whatever professional obligations that's not the issue here. But it does seem like I'd much rather stay till, me speaking just for myself, till 10 o'clock on an occasion, on an every other Tuesday, as an example, than have the third Tuesday where we get out and the sun is still out. So it's more just how can we be more efficient? I think your point is really well taken, Kitty, about it's a very high functioning board and why change things if we, but I do think there's room for efficiency there. And that is, I'm pointing to that example as one place. And so, I guess that would be the option on the table would be, maybe an every other third Tuesday or something like that, where we, still kind of keep the same number of hours. We just kind of consolidate those into fewer actual meeting times.
Yeah, Elena.
I would be open to that as well. I think that the idea of doing something during the day is of interest if we think of a work session. If there was such a thing as a lunch and learn, even if you could attend remotely, if you worked outside of Boulder or it didn't work with your schedule, I'm super flexible, so none of it bothers me in particular. But I also feel very much in support of finding a way to accommodate my fellow board members. Absolutely.
Thanks. Other folks?
Yeah, I second Jason's proposal. I think anybody coming forward with a proposal for us how to be more efficient shouldn't be questioned to what their motive is and how they didn't know about this. I think people are trying to figure out how we can get the most done. I think similarly, when we've had a Tuesday meeting where there's only one topic on the agenda and it doesn't take very long, I'm like, ooh, that would have been perhaps better to have one meeting with two topics. Also be more efficient of the rest of the staff's time because they only have to set up once. So that's more efficient for the district and saves money and staff time and burnout. So I'm sympathetic that if people are coming forward with proposals to do something slightly different, it shouldn't be totally on them to prove that what we've got is a disaster and this is a big change. We can make incremental changes that make it better and more efficient and that serve the board we have now, not the one we had before. So we have more people with jobs and more people with kids. So I think some efficiency is good both for the board and the staff, and that'll help us make better decisions for the district and its kids.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Yep, Beth?
Yeah, I'll jump in here as well. I think I'm in the same camp as Elenia. I almost want to say ditto. I am in support of making a change where we have greater efficiency. And I think that could be accomplished a variety of ways. It could be the option of, I don't really like option one, as I'll call it, which is adding to our already existing meetings. We're here until 10, 11 at night already. I don't see that being moving towards efficiency. I see that moving towards inefficiency. So I think we would need to restructure it in some way to gain greater efficiency. How that's restructured, is it you meet during the day and you attend virtually as an option? Is it we, I guess, drop one work session every other month? And then I don't know. I'd be open to all of that. But I would agree that I think it's an opportunity as a new formed board to think about what we want moving forward. So.
Great. Thanks. Yep, Jorge?
Yeah, thank you for opening the discussion on this. I agree. I think, looking at the structure, adding some flexibility by thinking about how we can change up those work session meetings that are once a month and either moving them around in terms of when they come on the calendar or making them, quarterly or, because it does seem like they're on the calendar. So we're filling that time up. And so thinking about how you can use that most efficiently, I think would be a good idea.
Nicole?
I'm open to the idea of maximizing efficiency. I think that's something that is important for effective boards, is to use your time wisely. I'm not really excited about having a virtual option. I think it is hard to have productive dialogue in a virtual setting. We've had multiple tech failures in our board meetings. It helps to be around a table and wrestle with topics, particularly when there's not consensus, when we're in the same room. So I wouldn't want the expectation to be that virtual is, that there's going to be a bunch of us participating virtually. I would like the expectation, if we're changing the schedule, to be much like it is now, where the expectation is an in-person attendance, and if extenuating circumstances exist, you can participate remotely. But work sessions in particular, because it is high dialogue, being together, I think is helpful. I also would be hesitant to add more, because that third Tuesday really is work sessions. And as we saw last week, when we had to have a very long executive session followed by a very long work session, it really made our meeting last a long time. Public comment occurred very late. We had students. That is not ideal. And so for me, moving forward, something I've been thinking about is, to the best of our ability, not having work sessions on, or exec sessions on days where work sessions exist, to help with that a little bit, or if it's a work session that might not take as much time. So I would be hesitant to add like a third work session topic or two really meaty work session topics on the front of a meeting, if we happen to have, and we can't always predict, exec sessions and when they arrive. So that's just something I'm holding space for, particularly after last week. I know that's not always the case, but something I'm trying to be mindful of in agenda setting. What happens in work sessions if we know that there's an exec session? So those are things I wanted to throw out there.
Kitty, and then Alex?
Now, Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, although you weren't here the first year I was here, so I could still be right, is that there have been times when we have not had that third work session meeting, I think. And what I've observed is that the work sessions become a function of what it is we're trying to do. And the more we're trying to do, obviously, the more time we're going to have to spend together talking about it. So, and with 40 policies, I mean, that's way more than we've been doing in the past. And I'm not opposed to anything that we have done, and I'm not opposed to doing less if that's what the board wants to do. Part of my original comments were made based on things I had heard, which may or may not be true, but all kinds of changes that have not yet come up here. So, I'm not opposed to doing less work if it's called for to do less work. Does that make sense? Okay.
Rob, do you just want to answer the question of, have we canceled?
I think that for the past couple of years, we've been filling up the board pretty heavily. But I would say maybe in the first 2 years, as I was getting my feet under me and the board and we were working together, there were times where we canceled those, right, Laura? And Laura would know, she's the one who cancels them, because we schedule them out and then we would cancel them if we didn't have anything.
Alex, and then Elenia?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say I don't think anybody's trying to have us do less work or have less time to get stuff done. So I think we should keep that in mind. One of the other things we had discussed informally was the ability, to still have space in our calendar so that when things came up, they wouldn't take 8 months to get scheduled to address them, and so we'd still figure out a way to address emerging issues. So I'm up for taking as much time as it takes to address the issues that we need to, and I don't think we need to engineer scarcity of time to talk to each other about the issues that are before us. We just need to figure out how to be efficient in the way we do it. And so as we do the prioritization and there isn't time for some things, I'm like, oh, well, maybe we need an extra 4 hours somewhere to get to the other 5 things we want to talk to, and I'm willing to do that work. So I don't think we should treat it as enforced scarcity, and I don't think we should think that changing something is somehow doing less. I think it's a chance to do more efficiently.
Okay. Elenia?
May I ask my fellow esteemed board members if anybody is interested in finding space outside of evening hours? Because I've heard that informally as well. And it doesn't matter to me either way, because I have older kids, so they don't want to have anything to do with me anyway. They hope I'm not home. But I was wondering if that's of interest, and if it is of interest, how we could flesh that out. The reason that it comes up for me is not so much that nighttime bothers anything. It's staff time. I wondered how that would be for staff to not have to stay an extra night and to have time during the day. Or maybe that would feel more like overload to staff. I don't know. And I'd like to know what other people think about daytimes.
Do you want to hear first from Rob about a staff perspective?
So if I were to ask staff what they wanted to do, I don't think they'd be voting for a fourth Thursday evening or Tuesday evening. I'll tell you that much. I do think that, I mean, it's a trade-off, right? Because I think our team works incredibly hard, and time during the day is time they could spend in schools, time that they can, have meetings. For me, the key is predictability, right? This is why the prioritization process has been so important for me, because when we know what's coming, the work that's ahead of us, I can schedule, staff can schedule their own time as professionals. We can schedule the collective time we need together. I mean, so many of the things we talk about are cross-functional, right? And so there's meetings and things that have to happen. I think that our team would be very open to daytime meetings, and I've seen that work in other districts. And it could be for different topics where we would do that. It doesn't have to be like a regular rhythm. I'm looking, I don't want to jump ahead, but if you see the big green blocks on August 20th and October 15th, this is when we get to the prioritization, I think is the key work of the district moving forward, which is the alignment of our strategic plan implementation, strategic plan metrics, and UIP. I think that those, and I'd propose we do those 3 times a semester, where we have really big, deep conversations on leading indicators for data, and updates on the implementation and what's happening. And, here's what we're seeing, here's what we're doing about it. And those could lend themselves to an 8 to 12 or a 12 to 4, or maybe not even that long if with enough advance notice. Because I think that those are big, meaty work of the board topics that would lend themselves to something like that. It would be hard to bring somebody in for like a one-off topic. And I do think, and I do agree with Nicole around the idea of, we do our best work when we're looking at each other and working together, and which has lent itself to more work sessions than other boards. Right, as an early preference that I heard in check-ins with board members, right? We want to be around, like we literally changed the configuration of our meetings. We want to look at each other. We want to talk about things. We want to, be able to dig into those things. So I do think that with the right scheduling, that could work if folks had the availability and enough advance notice. And it might help us for those topics to have maybe some staff that might not typically be staying around, but I would just have to let them know, hey, on these dates you have to be there. And as long as we know in advance, that's why we do this process, we'd be great.
Great. So love to hear individual responses to Lelania's questions, starting with Kitty, and then Jason, and then Alex.
So I just have a clarifying
Okay.
question. So were you talking about doing business meetings during the day or work session type meetings?
I had no clarification of that. I had heard that, and so I was just asking what people's thoughts were about daytime use, and I was especially concerned about if that would be functional for staff or even preferable for staff.
Because my concern with changing our business meetings would be that our schedule needs to be predictable for the public.
Mhm.
And the public knows when we meet, and they know when if we want to talk, it's going to be on a Tuesday night, and that if we switched it around, it might make it more difficult. And
So
the
maybe
public-
only work sessions
yeah,
then.
the public is extremely important.
Kitty, what's your openness to work sessions during the day?
I'd be fine.
That'd be fine?
I'm
Okay.
very flexible too,
Cool.
since
Love
I'm
it.
no longer selling shoes. Yay!
Jason, I had you next, then Alex, then Beth.
Yeah, I was just gonna maybe put an idea on the table that tries to, well, this is your job to summarize the conversation, but more like, it sounds like we could be moving towards, the idea of maybe keeping an every other third evening and then moving one of those, the other one to a potential daytime session.
Mhm.
And so we're keeping the number of hours. If you look at the schedule, I don't want to speak for I'm just trying to put an idea at the table to move us forward here, or on the table. I don't know that there's a lot of hours we can cut out of our time. And so maybe the efficiency comes in moving that around, not so much changing the number of hours. And so that would be, to answer your question, I'm open to daytime session, and maybe that could be a way forward, is with kind of an alternating evening, daytime every other month.
And I also heard that for some people, daytime meetings would create efficiency because they would think better. Go ahead.
Thank you, Heather. That's about where I was about to go. I mean, I do like the idea of thinking of the data deep dive on the strategic plan, on the performance data, on the UIP, all sorts of stuff. And I believe like that's fine to separate from decision-making work sessions. And I think for the sake, like may even use the R word and call it a retreat. So we're not treating it like a work session. So yeah, 4 hours is enough time to look at this much data. And if it is during the day, for me, that's a lot better than starting at 5:30 and then trying to have public comment for an hour afterwards. So I might add the word retreat and suggest that let's schedule 2 or 3 data deep dive retreats a year. I'd be delighted to do that anytime we could do it. And during the day would probably be better.
Excellent. Thanks. Beth?
I just kind of want to add my voice to the chorus here. Yeah, I am very much, to your original question, in support of moving to daytime. I was one of the people, maybe the only one, who said daytime is better for me. I think much better. I'm a morning person, like through and through. For me, I kind of turn off at like 8 p.m. and our meetings obviously go much past 8 p.m. So personal preferences, and it's not about personal preferences, but for me, that would be better. So I do like the idea of having an opportunity to maybe get access to some staff with advance notice that we may not be able to capture after hours. I think that sounds great. I think the opportunity to have robust conversations 2-3 times a year, as you suggested, would be lovely, especially exchanging out some of those Tuesday night work sessions for that. That sounds great to me.
Great. Jorge?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Kitty that it's important for us to have those set scheduled meetings for the public to be able to come and open comment, to share. That's really, we need to facilitate that for the public as much as possible. I like the flexibility of moving some of the work sessions to the daytime. I'd be in favor of that as well, if we can figure that out. And do a deep dive. I like having that additional time. That does give us some additional flexibility to really kind of get into what we're doing and think through some of this decision-making stuff we have to do.
Kitty?
So I have a clarifying question for Alex. So you brought up the word retreat. Does that denote something different from a work session, or do you just like the word better?
It sounds more fun.
Well, it does sound like more fun. No, but I'm curious as what you mean by that.
Right.
I guess it's, I do think of it as a deeper dive. Like we can do a work session for 40 minutes, but if we're going to spend a half day on a topic, it means we're actually like stopping thinking about everything else in our lives. And so it does, I think it signifies, a deeper exploration of the topic. Not that it would be a decision-making. So if it's between work session and, action item, that's different. But I'm talking about the ability to spend some time on something that's a big priority, that's frankly way too much to address in any hour, 55-minute session or presentation. So like that just deserves so much more time than that in order to give it justice.
So follow up on that. So are you envisioning that being separate from work sessions that we need to do? Or are you open to, if when we get to I would assume we'd have some kind of schedule on this day of this month of whatever is when our daytime thing is. If there isn't anything coming up that requires a deep dive and there are a lot of work session type items, are you open to filling the time with that, if that's what's necessary?
If that were necessary, but I actually believe that there are some particular topics that by the nature of what they involve require that kind of time. So I think understanding the performance data is not something we could ever do justice to in an hour. Similar with the strategic plan and UIP stuff, when we get into the what's going on with the schools. I think those are the topics that beg for a retreat and an in-depth look. But I'm not opposed to consolidating other work sessions if we find out that wow, that 4 hours was super efficient. Maybe we should do that with another topic.
Rob?
Love to go to the board here and make some adjustments. That's okay. If I put this board here on, does it really mess with the?
No.
It doesn't mess with it. So,
Are we presuming we can use that?
no.
Okay, good.
No, just maybe moving it a little closer. So here's what I propose based on the conversation. We have right now, I would say, 4 work session deep dive topics that I think you could spend multiple hours on. You could schedule a 9 to noon, you could schedule an 8:30 to, like, whatever the board would prefer. August 20th, right? So you could take that from an evening meeting to a daytime meeting. This is where what I would hope to do is really lay the groundwork on how we're aligning the UIP with the strategic plan, and then give you all and the public a first look at the data dashboards and to see what's missing. Like we'll do our. Thanks. We'll do our very best job to engage the board prior to that, right? But then to figure out what is that going to look like as the rhythm for the next 5 years as we measure the implementation and the progress of things related to the strategic plan. And so we would intro it here. In September, what I would propose is a deep dive into declining enrollment, right? Where we could look at, right now our team is working on dashboards that look at, how do we bring in exit survey data? How do we bring in withdrawal codes? How do we dial that down and make that granular? And then identify next ideas and steps and how the district and board can work together and get some direction kind of on what that looks like. By September, we'll have past Labor Day. So we'll have some early headcount numbers. We don't do our official enrollment update until December because there's lots of processing and it gets reported in October. But you have enough information to give folks a peek into, wow, are we ahead of where we thought we were going to be? Are we behind on where we thought we're going to be? What kind of kids are we losing? It gives you enough space between this and our open enrollment window to make some tweaks and adjustments if we needed to. So I think that you could spend 3 to 4 hours on what I think is an incredibly important topic to the board. Then we would come back in October, right, where we're finalizing the UIP. In August, we'd also give you a calendar of here's the data, here's the leading indicators, here's what you can expect, when you can expect it, and here's how you're going to see it. So we would set ourselves up for October, digging into the leading data. We should have some pre-assessment data. We should have some maybe data from the previous year ready to go. I think you could do a deep dive here. I'm not so sure about December, but we could schedule it as much. I mean, that's pretty close to the holidays. You could move that, bump that, float that day if we wanted to. But again, it's this rhythm of here's what's happening, here's the leading indicators, here's how we're responding. Depending upon how the rhythm of that goes, we could bring in different staff, you could hear from different schools. If you had enough time, you could really dig into it. So that gives you 1, 2, 3, 4, August, September, October, and December. There's only 2 meetings in November that you could take off from those Tuesday nights, float them to a time that the board's agreeable to. And I think it's really meaningful work that needs everybody with a clear head. And it doesn't matter if you call them retreat work sessions, something cool we come up with. It doesn't matter to me. The idea would be that I could really schedule the work of our team around those big days. Those become big days for the district and for the board. And I think separating those things out could work out really well.
Excellent. I see lots of nodding around the table. Nicole, question, comment, concern?
No. Yes, one of those.
I gave you so many choices.
Yeah. I like the idea of if we are adjusting the schedule to have those set in stone in advance, so we all know. logistically speaking, it is a nightmare to try to find a date that works for everybody when it's not predetermined. Likewise for time. So I would like to be really clear that the times are consistent, just to be able to manage. So this far in advance, we can all manage our schedules. And so I am not stuck in the place where I have to do this work meeting. Well, can we move the meeting? Or it's been predetermined, it's on the calendar. If you can't make it like any other board meeting, the expectation would be that you just notify the board president, the board secretary, the superintendent. But I would like the dates and the times for those to be set. And then I would be willing to also entertain the other blue dates, which are the other days that we would have typically had work sessions where as needed, or if we want to do the work, if there's work to do, we can do them in the evenings, not in the mornings. And if there's no work to do, we just cancel the meetings. But I don't want to hold all that space necessarily in the morning if we don't know for sure that we're going to need those big chunks of time. So that was what I wanted to throw out there around some of the logistics of managing a group this big plus staff.
Lelania?
I wondered, to the point of we have lots of work to do and we're all very invested in the work. And I hear what you're saying, that you may still want to have some evening work sessions, like maybe some of those days you'd still want to have those. I just wanted to say that I'm open to it not being on a Tuesday if that isn't everybody's preference. There's not, to me, you can, as long as you nail down the dates. I hear what you're saying. These are non-negotiable dates. These are dates, you put it in your calendar, you're there. But then if you had to have a work session because something came up, then because you'd never want to have a retreat or whatever we're calling it during the day and then go to a work session at night. That would be too much.
And I wasn't suggesting that. I was talking about the June 18th, the November 19th, where there was not already
Two.
So there's
Yeah.
a couple other ones that we
Okay.
haven't flagged as those
Right.
big substantial data
Mhm.
related
Okay.
dives. Because there still are, and that's what, just to reference, the blues are work session days, and the black on the top for the dates is
Okay,
a regular
so-
meeting. So I wouldn't suggest doubling up.
Okay, so now that I understand that the blues are work session days, I do see that there are additional days where you could put a work session in the evening, but I still will put out to my fellow board members if Tuesday is not the day because you have something for work, whatever. I think that we should be able to have that conversation as well. Tuesday isn't a necessity one way or the other for me, but I'm open to that conversation.
Rob, you've been fiddling with things. You want to catch us up?
Yeah, I would love to do that. So I've got we don't know what we're going to call it, maybe retreat. I'm calling them day sessions, right? They're yellow and bright and fun, Heather,
Yep.
just for you.
I'm there.
And so you could move those all here. It would leave the 19th for a work session if you chose, which could be helpful because that's going to be right after the November election. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and the things that are going to impact our ability to fill the board up. And June 18th, but I mean, I would anticipate, I don't know that we're going to need June 18th. You're going to okay. So forget that. But so like a day session, right? Big chunks of time. And if we could get like a 9 to 12 or a 10 to 1 or whatever folks work. And then that's it. I mean, these are really important days, and I'll let my team know they can't be absent on those days, and we'll lock it in.
Yep, Beth?
Just want to make sure I'm keeping up here. So we're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4 potential days: August 20th, September 17th, October 15th, and December 17th. This is like really
Right.
straining my eyes. I'm doing my best. So those 4 days would become day sessions. We'll come to an agreed upon time that will be posted. Everyone can know in advance. The question I'm still a little unsure of is, I heard Nicole suggest that we have the the work sessions, August 13th, December 10th, and 17th as, right? Is that,
So those are regular meetings.
those are regular, oh, wait.
Black and black.
Open would be November 19th.
Oh, okay.
And June 18th.
Okay. Because I heard you say we might have work sessions as needed.
No, I was saying we could cancel June 18th or June 9th or November 19th if we didn't need them.
Schedule them, hold
Got
the
it.
dates on your respective calendars, and then if it turns out there's nothing to do, then by all means, stay home.
So one thing I've been trying to do, and staff has been trying to do, is to get our agendas sooner. That means we have to have the staff have deadlines to get the agendas to Rob. We have an agenda meeting about it. If those dates float, I just worry that we're not going to continue to try to make improvements on getting the agenda items to the board members in ample time to read them and be prepared. If those dates are moving, we can train people to know I have to get this information done by this date, but if that date changes, I can see potential for not knowing when those dates are. And I really want to continue to work towards getting agendas out by Friday evening, because I know or Friday as early as we can, because I know some board members do appreciate having Friday to look at them rather than waiting till Monday. So that's one, as Rob and I continue to get timely agendas out. That's one reason why I would like to be consistent on the day with Tuesdays.
Yep, fine.
Do you mean have the day sessions on Tuesday? Okay. Because I was saying, could it just be the norm of 4 or 5 days in advance, whether that's the day session falls on a Tuesday or a Thursday, or just that idea that we have sufficient time to.
Theoretically, that should work.
Right.
In practice, it doesn't. Because, I mean, so many people, you've heard that we're lean. It's not a lie. We are very lean, and folks are juggling lots and lots of priorities. And, decisions come to our team around, whether it's getting things on consent or budgeting. I mean, the big things don't sneak up on us. It's the small things. It's we need to add this $200,000 change order to this project because 2 weeks ago. So I would say for those things, it can be easier to just say, get it to us by Wednesday, right? And if not, it's not on the agenda, right? Which is what, kudos to Laura, who's been holding the line on that. And it's been hard because there's been good reasons why people turn things in late, and no late work, right? Because otherwise, then you don't have it ahead of time. And it's hard for you all to make decisions, right? We have to be considerate and be responsive in that way. So predictable is better in my opinion, but if we were to say today, right, there's one or two things that you wanted to float and we had lots of advance notice, that would be a lot more doable than, we get together on August 20th and you say in 2 weeks, we should have something on this. I think that could wreak havoc.
And, yep, Kitty?
Excuse me, I'm having a lifesaver. Whatever we decide about the day, the day session, and whether it's Tuesday or another day, I would strongly advocate for institutionalizing that so that the public can get used to the idea of whatever, there could be this work session on X day of the week. Most people don't come to our work sessions, but we absolutely have to, we don't want folks to think that we're pulling an end run and didn't let them know in time.
I'd say specifically for these big deep dives, your DAC members, SAC members may want to attend, may want to get engaged and pay attention. You're going to get on June 11th, you're going to get a really thoughtful set of recommendations around our UIP from DAC. I'm incredibly impressed with the work that they're doing. And so to the extent, I don't think we're alone. I think that folks will show up. I think they're going to pay attention. I think they're going to care. So to your point, Kitty, making those predictable, I think does make a ton of sense. And it gives folks the rhythm to know and understand who's going to be there and how that could work.
So looking to your wizard scheduler, Laura, do we have time to try to find a daytime opportunity for August 20th? Is that, you think, enough lead time based on your experience? That's okay. Okay, it's a couple months.
And I want to say that's a good day for meetings, I'm guessing.
Yep, go ahead, Jason.
But it would be essentially August 20th. It would be the same, like if we pick Tuesday from
Right.
9 to 12, it'd be the
Right.
same time for the 4.
I'm just worried about
going
how
forward. Yeah,
soon
yeah.
that one is, yeah. Right, so we'd be like the Wednesday that after when it, whatever, like the Wednesday from 9 to 12 or something, or Thursdays from 1 to 4, whatever you end up saying, it would be the same time. That's the predictability that we're looking for.
But just
Yeah.
to clarify, are we not even talking about anything about Tuesdays though? Just to your point, Nicole, and your point, I mean, is for predictability for staff, for advance notice, is that the? is that the-
Mondays are bad, Fridays are bad.
Wednesday late starts are bad.
Wednesdays are bad because our team does PD. Tuesdays are good. You know, the other thing to consider is we'll have to take a couple of these rooms offline, right? With the schedule, these rooms are packed 24/7. We built this, it's not like the old building where you just had the permanent dais and it was only the boardroom. Like we use these, so that would be, but that's not a big deal. Tuesdays, I think, are fine. I mean, if we do business on Tuesdays, if the board does business on Tuesdays, if it works for people and we shift the time and it helps people out, I think that works well. And if there are other one-off things that as we get going on this, we feel like, gosh, something might work, I think we could always adjust. But shifting, these work sessions to daytime sessions on deep, meaty topics, I think that is something that our staff will embrace. And a lot of the work that they're doing, a lot of the work just maybe isn't as visible to the board and the public. So I think it's a good way to sync it all up. So,
Yeah, go ahead.
we talked about this when we met at the Broadmoor, is kind of one of the things about, staff being, feeling overwhelmed and a lot of, just a lot on their plate. Would this be seen taking a Tuesday evening off and adding in the daytime? Would this be a welcome change, or would this be seen?
as long as we don't add Tuesday evening meetings that they have to go to. I mean, like I'll tell Laura, just, block those Tuesdays off for me.
But I mean, that's my question.
Yeah, no, I do think.
Tuesday night off, would people be?
I think that folks would be appreciative. I think that, staff's role in board meetings is an important and critical role. They want to know what you're talking about, thinking about. They want to know what the discussions are around policy. It helps them to inform their work. So when work shows up and they present to you all, you're not like, what is this? Like they've listened to you. If they're not in person, they're watching online. Right. And that is just, for senior level staff in a school district, that is how it goes everywhere I've been. And typically they do exactly what we do. If you watch any board meeting in America, there's a staff section, they all sit there. So, but I do think that if I were to go into cabinet tomorrow, and Kathleen, you can, or Lori, you could share. And if I say, look, we're going to be cutting out these night work sessions for day sessions, I think folks would be pleased.
Can I just propose a couple times?
Yep.
And we can get
I was
consensus
gonna
on
ask,
that?
maybe morning, afternoon?
I mean, I was
Yeah.
thinking maybe, you said 9 to noon, that does sound good. However, like thinking about like school start times, does that work from like a schedule? Yeah.
9 to noon?
Do 10 to 1 either. I mean, not 10 to 1, serve lunch, 9 to noon, serve breakfast and lunch. Like,
Right?
Or we do brunch. I like the brunch idea.
Uh-huh.
I'm down with 9 to noon, but that's
9 to
fine.
noon. Going once, going twice? Wait, Jorge's checking.
I think we start with 9 to noon. I think the first one, 9 to noon, will be plenty, right? And then I think 9 to noon here is fine. This one, maybe a little bit longer.
Hold on. Jorge's got maybe a conflict. 9 to noon. Does it help if we all watch you? Okay, tremendous.
The first bite of the strawberry rhubarb crisp
That's
is in the books.
Is it good? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Mhm.
I can make it work.
You make it work, 9 to noon? 9 to noon. Fantastic, 9 to noon it is.
That efficient work.
Great, excellent, fantastic. Right, I think you did all the work. You put the yellow thing up there and that was the deal, right? Is, there you go. Right,
Yep, 9 to noon. And we'll know if we press up against it on October 15th, if we have to make some adjustments, if there's some deeper dives there.
Laura, you'll follow up.
I think
with
it's good.
folks?
It's a good step in the right direction.
And Laura will follow up by email just to make sure everyone has the same. You'll figure it out? Uh-huh. Okay.
Question, and I'm just gonna throw it out there. Casby, December 5th, 7th, would you want to do one of them, Casby or not? Just asking. Okay.
No, because if we're talking about UIP work or strategic plan work, you don't want to do that off campus, right? You want to do that here.
Rob, is it fair to say that we effectively did not change the size of the meeting container? So we still have enough, we have the same amount of sort of meeting units?
Yeah, and we may have grown it a little bit, which I think is okay because it's the work, right? You've grown it in a way that's incredibly aligned to what we're doing. And so that's different than a bunch of new different things.
Right. Lovely. Fantastic. Well, yay. I love consensus convergence around an idea. Anything else we need to talk about right now related to meeting structure, or shall we jump into what are you going to do with all this meeting time? Sure. Yeah, and we're going to need it here. Yeah. Yeah. Hold on. Go ahead. Alex?
Yeah, one thing I've talked with Rob about before too is trying to figure out what the process is when things emerge sort of between our prioritization process.
Oh, right.
And I'm thinking again about not super meaty things, but sort of smaller urgenty things.
Mm-hmm.
And like I like to call it in the other boards I've been on, it's like new business gets introduced, and it's not just on the long range agenda setting prioritization process.
Mm-hmm.
So that there can be a way to modify and amend an upcoming agenda item and sort of hold the space for that in a work meeting or otherwise. So that sometime like every 6 weeks, there might be a chance to address timely things.
Like a placeholder that you say just in case for
And that's,
sexy new stuff?
yeah, and that would be a meeting that goes longer
Mhm.
because there's something we collectively decided is worth staying till 10
Mhm.
for.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts or concerns about that before
I just, as long as we have an understanding on the turnaround time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like from board identifying an issue, regardless of its urgency, to finding the staff time that may be distributed in some places that would need to be pulled to address said issue, and then being able to come back with a quality work product, right, to respond to the issue is something that I would need to have time to do that. What's happened in the past, Heather and Kitty and Nicole and Beth, you would know this, is that like I just kind of shift the board when I see those things emerging. Like I'll shift the board, say, this is on fire, let's do this, or oh, we need to hear that. But I'm okay with a formalized process where it's more process generated versus just superintendent managing the work. Like I'm fine with that, with the idea that sometimes when you add, you got to take off, right? And you can't add. And so as long as we had some ideas and structures around what that would look like, and maybe Alex, if you had an example or two that you could share that you felt like would fit into this bucket, it might I might be able to better say, okay, if you were to bring that up, it would take me, I think, this long to be able to sort that out and get something back that's quality that the board could consider.
Do you have an example just off the top of your head?
Total hypothetical, but you could see something like a follow-up to a Green New Deal where there's something else that needs to happen in the next year after a major event that the community cares a lot about.
Mhm.
Or the community is upset about something and we want to be able to communicate out to them the district's position on it.
Mhm.
And that could be anything from a tragedy to a great accomplishment to a new legislative outcome or something, right?
Mhm.
Or yeah, and I totally agree with all your caveats on it, Rob. I'm not trying to spring something on the staff that we can't prepare for, but I don't think that our agenda setting process, as one of the newly elected people for the last 5 months, has felt like adequate to the task of like if something came up that we felt was urgent, waiting for this meeting to schedule it for later in the summer seemed not as responsive as we want to be. And that's acknowledging that you're always adjusting things and fitting the space for what we need. And I defer and trust your judgment in that. So I'm not questioning that, but I'm thinking about holding the space so that we don't remain silent as an institution on something that the community is looking for an answer to.
So the suggestion on the table is hold some kind of sort of TBD spot periodically on the agendas for things that might come up. Rob wants to say a thing, and then Kitty.
And then the way that I would plan for that is I would hold one of the 2 work session topics,
Mhm.
right? And you could call it, I don't know, call it whatever you want, right? But it would take up space on the board to do that, to
Right.
hold the time.
Kitty, go ahead.
Well, I don't recall in the time that I've been on the board that something on fire has originated from a board member. I mean, the desire to address something that's emergent. It's come through administration. So, I mean, I get your point, Alex. I just don't foresee it happening because it's not likely that we are going to be aware of something that is urgent and needs to be addressed that Rob and staff are not already aware of.
Okay. Other thoughts, perspectives? Yeah, Nicole?
So I was going to piggyback on that a little bit. And I will reference former board president Marquis, where she was always really good at double checking and having individuals double check whether it was a system-wide problem that's within the board's capacity to deal with, or if it's a site-based problem, or if it's an individual person problem. And how do we know, how big the problem and pervasive it really is and might be? And to Kitty's point, when something is pretty big and pervasive, or if I hear something that could get pretty big and pervasive, I ping Rob immediately. And sometimes Rob is aware and they're working on it, and sometimes he's not. But if things are percolating of concern in the community, teachers are hearing about it, principals are hearing about it, our cabinet's hearing, like everybody's starting to hear about it. And those things, the board has historically quickly turned around and made time for. It's not like they're ignored until the next prioritization. So I just want to say that when things are truly, in my experience, a system-wide problem or a really big problem in an area that is we have to address, it does get addressed in a timely manner. And I also want to add, to Rob's point, being really clear on what that process might look like, because we haven't even gotten to this process of prioritization. So how would we establish a process to make sure the will of the board majority really thought that was a topic to address, and that we would have to work out if it was something outside of prioritization, because it's not something the board has typically done before. Even the Green New Deal, they got added to board prioritization and it was on the agenda.
In my experience, I do think that there are times as elected officials, right, where people will look to you and ask, what are you doing? Right. And a lot of times what they're asking you to do is my job. A lot of times that actually falls in my purview, but it's also, we have to understand that the public is informed to a point. Right. So to the extent that we want to create space for board members to say, this is the thing, this is what we're hearing about, do we want to prioritize that or not? Being on the record for the community to say, this is important, we're hearing you, we're listening, we're not, tone deaf, we know these things are emerging. But know that in those spaces that I will clarify things that I think are the role of the superintendent based on, our agreement. I'll clarify the bandwidth that we have and the other things that are happening. And so we can create the space. It's not a reprioritization. It's an extenuating circumstance. And at a minimum, what we would provide for the public is, hey, here's what's happening. Here's where we are. Or it might be, we can't really comment on that. There's more to the story. We're working through this. If it's a personnel issue, if it's a privacy issue, a lot of things, these things they get really tangled up pretty quick depending upon the issue. So I do think you can create the space. I don't think it's an automatic reprioritization, but it gives the board a space to have, a 25, 30-minute, reserve the space for a 25, 30-minute conversation to the frequency the board feels like that's appropriate, once a semester, twice a semester. And then we can build that into the schedule so we know that it's coming up, because and I do sympathize with folks who haven't been through the prioritization process before, feeling like they've been a little bit sidelined this whole semester. Like I hear that. And we don't want anybody to feel that way. Again, with a board I'd worked for a long time, we just kind of worked it in and made it work. But from a process perspective, I can see why people might feel that way. So, but we can totally do that. I mean, that's what we're doing today, is building this. So.
Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Well, I would just add, I mean, what I've seen on multiple other boards that I've been on is in fact that it's a board discussion. When someone says, hey, I have a new business item, I think it would be great if we could have 20 minutes to talk with Rob about this topic. Then we would get a sense of the board if there's a majority that wants to have that interaction. I think frequently, to your point, it is exactly the kind of thing where as elected officials, you're getting pressure on something that's happened. There's no real place to talk about it. It is in fact, obviously something that's the superintendent's role or something. So it's actually really useful to tell the public that rather than have us have another 150 people come pressure campaign us to change it when it's not our role. So I think it's a way of dissipating some of that public pressure efficiently, saving a bunch of board time so that we can say, hey, Rob, I really care about this. Seems like some people are upset. What's the deal? And then he can very carefully and in a nuanced way, taking into account all the HR and privacy issues, be able to communicate to the public whatever we can communicate.
The Rob wizardry.
And then we're trying to
Yeah.
reinforce and support that
Yeah.
in order to like dissipate things that otherwise are just going to waste a ton of the communities and our time.
Several folks want to comment. I saw Jason, Lelania, and then Katie. And then we should probably figure out where we are on this and sew it up.
I want to go through this process first. I'm looking forward to this prioritization process, but I'm thinking to kind of Alex's point, and I feel like the prioritization section of our meetings when we were able to raise priorities is not a very efficient process and not a very thorough process. And maybe there's opportunity in that's already built into our schedule to kind of turn it into maybe a shorter discussion or something, rather than just kind of a raising of hands of things and then no comment or no follow-up. And maybe there's reasons to not do that, but I also think like that feels like again, I want to go through this process first before we propose ideas and see how this goes. But it feels like we kind of raise ideas, they go onto a list, and there's no real discussion of it until the actual prioritization meeting. So all that to say, I'm saying that before we've even gone through this process today, but I think that seems like that could be a better, like we could structure that time a little bit more, I don't know, to allow for more discussion.
I think the challenge with that, right? But let's play this out for staff and for me, right? You've been sitting on something you want to talk about, right? Sometimes I know about those things beforehand. Maybe something comes to you in a meeting, right? And you want to bring it up and you want to have a discussion on it, right? We haven't had the time to prepare, to think about what that might look like. I think that the process we've used in the past, and look, all processes can improve, and I'm not like saying that they can't, is you get it on the list. Everybody on our team knows what's on the list. They're thinking about, okay, in my rhythm of work, what on the list do I have? Am I getting ready to do anyways, right? What on the list would be new? How do I figure those things out? I mean, I think that the challenge becomes if you bring something up and expect to have a deep conversation on it, you might not get the information that you might need, not just for me, but for your other board members. Right. And you can't tell other board members what you're going to be bringing up beforehand, because that'd be a violation of open record law. So I do think that I hear what you're saying, but maybe this space that we're talking about, right, could be hey, if it's on the list or, what's going on, maybe we could work some of that in there so folks know it's on the list so they could prepare what they think that the board should collectively take on or not. It's just bringing those things up in the time. And, you build these processes for the worst of times, not the best of times, right? So you want to make sure that you're careful. Like if there's something that gets super contentious, right, that we have a process that everybody feels like they see everything coming, they know what's happening, and that you've got a process that respects all board members and staff, and that we can do meaningful work.
Lelania and then Kitty.
I guess I needed some clarification. If we put in a couple 30-minute sessions here or there, is that expectation or the want for us to discuss it as a board, whether we're interested in having it really become a priority, or is it to discuss the item itself? I think those are two different things, because I kind of hear what Jason's saying where we put it out there and it kind of like goes up, poof, and it just goes, and you don't really know if there is any will of the board behind it, right? But maybe it's like something, cell phones being an example, there might be huge will behind that, but you don't know that for a long time. Maybe even if you could say, oh, we talked about it for a few minutes and we're getting on that. But we don't need staff to know everything about it, then that would be weird. Like, I would never want to put staff in that position. I think I would only be in favor of it if we were gauging what other board members felt like about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no. Well, I appreciate the conversation. We're trying to solve a couple of problems, right? We have one, an emerging issue that we need to show the public we're aware of and things are happening, right? We have I've got this idea. I think everybody's with me. How do I know? Right? And then how fast can we go? And then what do we take on or off the plate? Like, to the extent that the board wants to create this space to do either of those things, as long as we all know what's coming and what's happening, and that it doesn't become a gotcha session where then folks are in a decision-making place where they're not ready to have the discussion as colleagues, as board members, or as staff. Like, I think for me, that's the watch out here is at the end of, and if it's at the end of a meeting or I would propose we probably, I mean, what I am proposing if we do this is you create some work session time. You also, the public, if you're talking about stuff and the public doesn't have a chance to see and react, and like, I think that's something that, I'm watching things happening in other districts where maybe the public hasn't been as engaged, and there are these shotgun approaches where push it, get it done now before anybody's really paying attention. Like, I would want to protect us because I know that's not the intent.
So Kitty has a thought, then Alex has a thought, and then Nicole, and then we should probably, again, finish this up.
Yes, so a couple of things, Jason, like what you brought up, and Alex and Lelania, this is the process for deciding not this, what we're going to do when we're done talking about structure, is exactly how we decide, is there will, or am I the only one who wants it? I have had things that were important to me that were not important to other folks, and we didn't address it, and that's just how it goes. But the other thing is that being on an elected board is very different from being on any other kind of board. I've served on nonprofit boards. I've served on advisory boards. We don't have any new business section in our agenda. And any other boards you've been on that have formal agendas, they have new business at the bottom. We don't do that because we can't do that, because we can't talk about it unless we've told the public we're going to talk about it. That's a violation of the law. And it can be really frustrating because things feel like they're slow, but we are a government organization and things have to be slow. Just like in the state legislature, they can't introduce a bill and then vote on it. I mean, they have rules. We have to read it X number of times. We have to make sure the public knows at least one meeting in advance that we're going to talk about this, and then we're going to vote on it at a different meeting. So it's just a really different way of operating, and I get how it can feel frustrating, but we are limited by what our role is. There was one more thing, and I can't remember what it was. When I remember it all.
Let me know. Alex, and then Nicole, and then maybe Kitty's last thing.
Yeah, for point of information, I'm suggesting that by having new business, we'd be having the same discussion we do about adding something to the agenda for prioritization. We're just having a process in which we process it faster. Mm-hmm. I've served on boards that are subject to Colorado open records law as well and chaired them. And you can have something come up and then have a discussion about how you need to address it and schedule it for the next meeting. That's what we're talking about doing. So it's the same thing legally as it is when we say we're going to put it forward into our participation process and we get a nod about people like, hey, do we want to talk about this and schedule it in sometime in the next 6 weeks or 8 weeks, whatever, in a way that fits that issue. It could be also as simple as the kind of response we have when we're having dialogue with Rob and we get the superintendent's report. And if we can have dialogue at that point, we could say, hey, can you say anything more about issue X? So there's a type on the agenda where Rob is responding to stuff in the field, and we're having a discussion about that. I don't think that's a violation of Cora either. So there's multiple ways to figure out how to appropriately have a board seem more responsive as needed. And again, I appreciate all the nuance of all the things that shouldn't be handled by a board, that shouldn't be micromanaged by us. But I do think we have, frankly, spent a lot of time getting public pressure campaigns on things where some statements from the district about what their position was could have alleviated a lot of it, which would have been us as an institution being responsive to the community and saved not only everybody who testifies all that time, but us also for getting more work done. So I think we should explore, and I'm curious to look to Kathleen's advice on whether we really can't raise up an issue that we want to add to the agenda and then process it sooner if we're doing an informal sense of the board.
So if I could just act out what I think we're talking about. This is some version of, hey, I'm getting a lot of questions about, is Rob seriously wearing those shoes? And honestly, I feel like we should address this. I would suggest that we talk about Rob's shoes and the serious violation that they may or may not be on the standing TBD item on the blah blah date. What does everybody else think? And then there would be some system of checking. Your shoes are fabulous, just so you know. Yeah.
I just made sure you were watching.
This is why we work. And then if there was a support of a majority of the board, say, yep, we'll put that on the TBD thing. That would be some weeks out so that Rob could give some thought to defending his shoe choice, which I think would,
Or tell us not to do it at all.
right. It'd be like this, like he could say, you are micromanaging me and this is not your lane, which we would be open to. Right. Is that some version of what you're envisioning? Okay. Kitty, your other thing came to you, and then Nicole? Oh, Kathleen in legal advice. You want legal advice first?
Yes.
Yes, they want your legal advice first, Kathleen.
Okay, and the actual legal advice being requested is about the formal OML notice and agenda requirements. Okay. So our obligation under state law is to give full and timely notice with as much information as possible in the agenda at least 24 hours before. So if we're talking about taking action on anything, it would need to be on an agenda, clearly and specifically. Could we add a little more conversation around, I'd like to talk about this at a future meeting because whatever, as one board member, I think that would probably be okay. If we start to get into a discussion though, or something that's not really current and timely that should have been on the agenda, it does get a little bit tricky. So I wouldn't advise that I think it'd be fine within the scope of the law to expand the discussion around those topics at the time they're provided. But I would be very cautious about having an actual board discussion at that point.
Whoops. Wow, so many people. Rob?
So by working those into a work session item, right? So there's no way that the board can take action, formal action. Does that help? I mean, I think my thinking around this is work sessions are more conversational. And to the extent that there isn't direction given to me, right, as we're talking about those types of things, or does it matter whether it's in a work session or a superintendent's comments or?
I would say, I believe what really matters here is the extent that the board is going to be in a discussion that the public has interest in and wants to hear. The way that we've got it structured now at the end of the meetings, it's individual board members without other coordination saying, here's the topic I want to talk about. I think under the case law, when it says, could that be anticipated? We would say no. Dr. Anderson and Laura, as the board secretary who prepares the agenda, couldn't have put it on and decided not to. I think that's really the intent. But I think if we find ourselves with board members who say, boy, I really have to talk about this, This is a current topic. We have to get ahead of it, and it's going to be a board discussion. We would need to be very careful about making sure that we have fulfilled the notice and the agenda with as much detail as possible elements.
Okay. Nicole, and then I'll go to Kitty's forgotten thought, and then figure out where we are and get after it.
So one thing I find myself thinking about related to Kathleen's comments on law, related to how our meetings or how these topics are currently handled and how we would maybe wish they could be improved upon. One thing I think about is our board norm about when topics come up that are pertinent to you or in the public, you bring them to the attention of the superintendent or the board president. And though, in part, to re-emphasize our no surprises, not have a culture of gotchas, and also with the majority of you being new board members, there is a practice and a learned understanding of what reacting to something you may have heard that may not be entirely true, and when we repeat it at the dais or we draw increased attention to it, that causes, it has ripple effects in our community with our staff and with the people that watch. And a lot of people watch our meetings. And it has happened where something that is false has been repeated and elevated. And it's not that my wish isn't for board members to speak to things or bring things up, but it's that careful understanding of how much do I know? Where are my blind spots? And how am I helping and moving the work and supporting our students and our staff in this district? And we haven't been through a full year. We haven't seen all the topics, but there is something to that about we are publicly elected. We are serving in a really important role, and we want to make sure that we're checking in on things that are coming up, and we want to make sure we're not elevating things that are not true that might be really concerning and problematic. And so bringing those forward first, as our board norm says, the superintendent to have that touch point, like, hey, I'm hearing this. What do you know about it? And then you might be able to get some more information that you don't already have. That's a really good first one-on-one conversation. And then bringing it to the dais to help your understanding, to help the community's understanding, because at the end of the day, we all want to be working from the same understanding and have that be based in a 360 view, not in a one-sided view. So I want to make sure if we're engaging in this process that's different, we have those personal touch points and those professional touch points as we move through.
Thanks. Kitty?
So it's not my forgotten thought, it's in response to this conversation. The way we do it now with agenda setting, I'd like to talk about this policy, or I'd like to talk about this issue. If we then start to discuss whether or not we want to discuss it, one, it can devolve into a conversation we should not legally be having. Two, it does not further the desire to make meetings more efficient, because we're spending more time talking about whether we're going to talk about something, instead of, one, if it's a big issue that, Rob or Nicole needs to, take the lead on, you work with them. But then we don't ever need prioritization meetings. And I know it's frustrating to have to wait. And I learned a lot of things about how to do meetings by doing it wrong. So I've made a lot of mistakes. I've tried to ask Rob a bunch of questions during the superintendent's report, and we don't do that. We can say, I'd like to find out this, but we don't engage in the conversation about it. We get the information later. If we did, that would also prolong the meeting. So I'd just be really careful about adding conversations that have not been put on the agenda. And like, as Kathleen said, we don't want to be in a position where we're doing something we're not supposed to do. And we've already been sued for that. And personally, I would prefer we not get sued for that again. So,
Thanks, Katie. Eleni?
Thank you, Kathleen, for explaining that. That helped me a lot. And I just want to acknowledge, I hear Alex saying something different, which I think, and Alex, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think Alex is talking about letting the public know that we've heard them on something. And that while we might not be able to share with them details, that we've heard them and it's being addressed. I think that's what Alex is talking about, but I'm not sure. And so we've gone around and around a few times. So I just wanted to make sure what Alex, as he brought this up, he had a goal. And I'm trying to be really clear on if I even understand what the goal is.
So, Rob?
So a couple things, I guess a question, if these work session times, right, if we were to agree to this, were to be to talk about the things that have come up in agenda setting as potential topics, and then that was posted, does that resolve some of the questions and challenges? And then I would just say, as you know, and I'm going to keep bringing this up, we have to build these things for the worst of times, not the best of times, right? We're looking at a really tight budget year where there's going to be a lot of choices, hard choices that folks are going that we're going to have to make, that people are not going to like, and they're going to want to stop us from, or stop the district, or stop whomever, and grab at any piece of whatever they can to say you shouldn't do this, do something else. I don't know what that other else is to solve your problem, but don't do it to whatever the decision is made. And sometimes those decisions are really tough. And so I do think that whatever process that we decide collectively to develop is not an expectation that, you know, somebody says, hey, you're cutting this program, what are you doing to solve that? It might be we're going to listen, right? And maybe there's some opportunities, but we're cutting the program, right? We're cutting the budget. We're closing a school. There are things that are responsibilities that we bear because we're responsible for everything that individual interests and groups don't necessarily concern themselves with. And they're very topical, and folks get very organized. And whether it's at Boulder City Council, whether it's at the Board of Education, whether it's Boulder County Commissioners, right? There's like a playbook on how do you respond in a way, and then what will that entity do, right? And how do you get folks to shift and change and do different things? And so I do think that that's an element of public work that we should be considerate of as we develop these things. I think that I'd be interested in hearing what Kathleen shares, but if we limit it to the things that we wanted to talk about, and then does that kind of help with some of that? So it's not like you know what's on the list before you have the session.
Kathleen, does that help legally?
I do think it helps legally. I'm looking at the Colorado Supreme Court case that was on this that I'm happy to send to board members just because I think it's always helpful to see how it's really been applied. And the key case is Town of Marble. And that question is really about, there was a big site in town that was being developed and there was a lot of controversy, a lot of public feedback. And the specific topic appeared on the board's agenda. It didn't specifically say they were going to take a formal vote that night. And what the court found was important was the topic. If people care about this topic, if they care about declining enrollment, if they care about Title IX, if they care about non-discrimination or bullying, will there be enough clarity on this board's agenda that people know to tune into that meeting? That's really what we're talking about.
Ray has a thought. Yeah.
If I'm hearing this right, I think there's two different problems to solve, right? One's the responsibility to the public as issues arise and our ability to address or not address that. And that's outside the scope of this because we can't discuss topics, right? And we don't want to do that. And the other one is thinking about how we prioritize and the 6-month lag to addressing those priorities. So, and I think what you're suggesting is possibly maybe a quarterly check-in, say, we set this priority list, and in October, do we want to have a work session that has a little bit of time saying, let's revisit our prioritization, and are we all in agreement that this, or is something arise that we need to address before our next priority session? And is that a potential compromise to kind of address that?
Yeah, what I'm trying to do is find space for the entire board to feel comfortable about how we prioritize topics. Like literally, it's the work of the board. It's the work that drives the district. And the feedback that I've heard is a whole semester is too long, and because we haven't been through it, a bit unpredictable for folks to know how that was going to turn out. And so I think that if you were to take a couple of times to say, these are the things that we wanted to talk about, but they can't wait till we talk about them in December. We can't wait till talk about them in May. We got to talk about these things now, and here's why, A, B, C. And we protect ourselves from the pressure campaign equals bumped up the prioritization list, right? Because the pressure campaigns, and I've been here 6 years, and I've seen them come and go. And sometimes, right, you'll get one pressure campaign and then the other group will hear about it and then they'll create another counter pressure campaign, and hundreds of emails later and lots of folks showing up. And those things will happen. I mean, they're going to happen in your tenure on the board. They will. And to the extent that we're listening and that we're in tune, we're not tone deaf, but we're also in tune to things beyond the interest that come through in those issues. And I think that, so I think we're trying to talk about where do you get the space to be able to say that and do that in a way that doesn't violate, the spirit of these laws, but also says, hey, I hear you, right? I'm bringing this up for our board to consider at some point. And then to the extent that we're able to bump those things as it makes sense. So yes. And yes to the first answer. And I think you could create the work session with the topics. And if it was the topics that you're prioritizing the work session, I think that's cleaner than we have this session. Oh yeah, and by the way, last week I got 500 emails and we should add this or we should do something with there. I don't know that we've come to a clean solution to that.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate Jorge and what Dr. Anderson have said very much. That's in alignment with what I was hoping to achieve. And to Lelania's question, I have two visions of what I'm trying to do. Number one, yes, a semester long, frankly, 9 month after election, getting to the topics of the new majority of the board is a ponderous process that's unresponsive to the election. So I'd like us to make sure we have a process that's responsive to the board that we have, not the one we had. And so going forward, I'm confident we would do that. And I'm pretty sure next time there's an election, they'll take that December meeting seriously in terms of a prioritization and be able to accommodate a new board appropriately. So I feel very confident about that. But I do feel like the district, when I campaign and when I'm out in the field, I think people do feel like sometimes BVSD is not responsive to the questions the field has and the parents have. And so I think it's, without getting into what to say and what we can say from the board versus the superintendent versus what we want to strategically or politically say, I think being responsive and being able to articulate what the district's position is on an issue of interest to the community is a plus for engaging the community and a responsive thing for elected officials to do. So I don't apologize for trying to pursue this. I think in terms of a logistical solution that would address all those things and accommodate the district's best interest is to say that in addition to for the formal agenda setting process that will deal with the agenda forward, is there something else that we would add to the parking lot for semi-urgent things that we'd like to talk about in the next few months? And then on a next work session, the next regular meeting, we can have on the agenda discussion of the parking lot as a topic that has these 6 issues that have been brought up, and then, appropriately discuss it. But I'm both trying to get so that there's a chance as a board member to say, hey, what does the district have a position on this issue? Not in a gotcha way, but in a dissipating pressure way. And yes, I've been around politics myself too. I know it can blow up, and I know that responding isn't always the right thing to do to manage a controversial situation. But I do think there's a place for elected officials to be able to say, I have this concern. I've heard from my constituents that they have this concern. I think it's a pretty interesting question. What do we think about it? That shouldn't take 9 months to get a hearing.
Did you have a thought? Did you have a thought?
Well, I mean, I do think that, you know, the space today, what I've seen on this board is that sometimes board members were to use board member comments for these issues, right? Those are, the board member comments are your comments as an individual board member. And I have seen over time, that, you know, board members leverage that to get to that space as of today. But what I heard you say, Alex, was almost in alignment with what I feel like in proposing with the work session piece. And I think if we can solve that problem, right, where you have a couple of times, we put some work session time aside, that we all agree if you want during those things that we bring that up during the agenda setting, which is at the end of the meeting, and if, you know, and then we can review those topics as a way, as the rhythm. I think that's a good first place to start. You know, as a governance team, you know, today maybe we don't get 100% of the things we do right? But we want to be moving in the right direction and taking a step in that direction. And then if it fails us, then we have an opportunity to think about it moving forward in the future. But it would be a change to practice, which I think that we can absolutely accommodate. I'll put them on the board here in a minute if everybody's in agreement. And then we start there.
Yep. Ooh. Kathleen, can you affirm that that's cool? Okay, great. We got two, not just one, but two
Can you see
thumbs
my
up.
tiny thumbs?
Yes, they're
'Cause
really
they're very
cute.
short.
They're
I know.
adorable. So,
They are.
Rob, we hold that as some
Radically
sort of
small.
TBD.
Yeah, what do we want to call it?
Beth gave me a shout out for TBD.
No, people are understanding.
Oh, right.
I think
Uh-huh.
what we're talking about is agenda setting topic review.
There you go. Yep. And
For all four people that were listening, that's agenda setting topic review.
the test will be at 8. The other thing, Rob, is I have heard a couple questions about, this is all great and fine. It would be wonderful if I knew where to find the running list of potential future topics. Is that something that can be made available to the board, or is already?
Yes, no, I think that we need to have a formal, Laura and I have been talking about this, a
Okay.
more formalized process where we can include it in news and notes. We can attach it to the agenda item, like so the entire public can see it, right? It can be there the entire time. All right, well, what are you doing? Yeah, but I'm gonna put them on these green things. But you have already written them.
I wrote them in green, so we know
So
for a work
you
session.
win. And then, all right, so we're setting the agendas now, like maybe every other month. So August, maybe do it mid-September, and then mid-November. Yeah, mid-November, and then you have to set like, I mean, you only need one? Well, now we have 3. Hold on a second. I've got 4. They're multiplying.
Okay, so many people talking. What I hear, Rob, is probably one will do,
All right, how about end of September?
end of September-ish.
Well, August, we're going to set today. So
Right.
like we'll have like,
Yeah.
you know, yeah. So there's not going to be, we're not meeting in July, right?
Right.
Is that, okay. So we'll have August, and then end of September is a work session. And then that gets us to, I mean, I think that's halfway through. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, I could do it September 10th or the 24th.
Later is better,
Okay.
24th.
Is everybody okay with that?
Going once? Yep.
All right.
And that will give you some lead time to develop some system for providing some transparency into the list.
Yep, here's what we'll do. We'll tell me what you all think. Again, right, I'm going to be real specific here. If it is brought up in agenda setting at the end of the meeting, we will add that to that list and we can attach the running list
Right.
for the semester only, not like the forever
Right.
for 10 years list, right? For the semester only, we can add that as an attachment to every agenda setting meeting every meeting that we have. So everybody in the public knows the things that are on the board's mind, right? If anybody asks you, say, look, I brought that up in agenda setting. I'd propose we put the board member and the topic, not just the topic, right? So then you could say, hey, look, I hear you, right? In my role as a board member, I've brought this up for the collective board to consider. I'm one of 7, right? And I've shared it with the superintendent.
And I would include the date just so people can keep track of how long their ideas have been on the list.
All right, date, name, topic.
Okay. Jason's got a thing, Alex has got a thing, then we'll take a break.
Just a question. Is there a way to get a public facing or public friendly version of this in news and notes? Okay. Well, I mean, I mean like, that's why the public facing is the key word. I mean, just so we can have a sense of.
I guess you're done.
Here's why I say no, because it shifts and adjusts. It does, right? And I wouldn't want to set expectations that something is happening and then I have to adjust and shift that because, a staff member has a death in the family or, something's happening, right? I do think that this is a very public meeting, this is very public, but, if folks once you put something out, folks are going to expect it to happen. And if it doesn't happen, they are going to assume why it didn't happen, which might not be the right way. So I think that that for me, I'd be hesitant to publish this. The topics are the topics; they'll be public. We're talking about that, but the order in which, because just folks don't respond very well if they think you're going to do something and you don't do it. So I don't like to overpromise and underdeliver. And every semester, things have shifted and tweaked a little bit. So go.
Alex.
Yeah, I just want to take a minute to thank Rob and Heather and Kathleen and Laura and everybody on the board for their careful deliberation of this proposal of mine. I feel very good about where we've gotten to, and I feel like my own thinking has been deeply improved by Kitty's feedback and Kathleen's clarifications. And I think this puts us in a place where we don't have to put anybody in a gotcha situation, where we can be thoughtful, and increase the responsiveness of the district to the community when we need to, which will help people and accommodate all the different members on the board and what they're trying to do for their own communities. So I really am appreciative of the deliberation and your patience with me to get where we are. I feel very good about it.
Hot dog. Excellent. Nicole, what is the general duration of your breaks?
It's variable, usually between 5 and 10 minutes.
Okay.
5-minute comfort break, board
Mhm.
members.
Will 5 do it? All right, let's take a 5-minute break and come on back at 7 o'clock by that clock right there. Away we go. We are ready to go.
Is my clicker not working anymore?
Lost you at your mic.
I'm gonna need that.
He loves the mic. I hear him begging for the mic. He's like, could I please have the mic?
Thank you, Kathleen. I have the mic, but then the clicker is, oh,
The accoutrement of leadership.
okay. So we've made some really good progress so far.
All right, there we are.
So I do want to say before we prioritize, and again, I appreciate, where's the clicker? Nope. Oh, you're going to push it through? Can I have the clicker so I can push it through myself? No. I just want to set some just awareness around what is going to be happening next semester that you may or may not know about, and what are going to be the constraints on staff time as we think about prioritization. Because if we fill the board to the gills, right, it's going to conflict with, I think, is critical work for the district. And let me walk you through that. Number one, I'm really happy with our day sessions. I think that that really puts first things first, right? You put your big rocks in first and the little rocks. So I think that's wonderful. I actually think that we've solved, one of my major priorities by doing that. Secondly, is the 25-26 budget process, the impacts of 1448, and then these two pending, looming, intimidating ballot initiatives, 50 and 108, which have been coined the citizens tax something or other, citizens tax cuts. So here's what I don't know. Like, those things will decimate state budget. So what I can't predict now is how much time I'll have to spend, or our team will have to spend, or as us as a board will have to spend trying to inform our public on the impact of these initiatives and what it would do to BVSD. Right? I think that right now our team is working on, as we present our final budget, just some more depth around, here's what 1448 does to BVSD. Here's how we can predict it in the future. So we're going to have that, right? We do not know where we're going to be in declining enrollment. We have some projections and predictions, right? But to the extent we'll know by September 17th, like what the deal is, like here's how many kids showed up, here's how many kids didn't show up, here's how many kids we're going to have to go get, here's why we're leaving. Like, it could create a hectic month here for us thinking about, hey, listen, maybe we want to change some of these open enrollment preferences to make a preference for parents whose kids who work in Boulder, whose kids might want to go to school here, or some other things like that. So that could be a big disruptor in the flow of work. We're opening the BVEA contract. I've let them know this. We had a very successful negotiations, that's out to teachers now to ratify. And they know and understand that we need to together collectively look at our salary schedule, our contract, and what are the limitations in the contract language today that are preventing some of the efficiencies that we might need to make the adjustments for budget in real time. We need to look at the salary schedule. We need to look at where and how that is being structured. We need to look at, is there ways where you can create greater gains in the potential turnover of salary schedule, more retirees, more newer teachers coming in. Like, I think there's a lot of things we have to look at. And for those of you that went to any of our negotiation sessions, first of all, out of the way we do that, and it's incredibly time consuming. And when you're talking about really difficult, tough topics, that will be a major time investment from staff. And then any other priorities as determined today, which I know that we have a lot of things that we want to talk about. I would just say that it's important for me to kind of paint the picture for staff time. And also, I would say that these things could trump potentially any other topics that get put up here. And if we have to make adjustments, just so you know, it'll be the busiest fall that we've had since I've been here. Any questions on any of these? Kitty?
Yeah, I know that 108, because I just looked it up, has something to do with affordable housing. How, can you just briefly say how that would impact us? Because I don't know any more about it.
I'm sorry, what about affordable housing?
108.
No, these are both tax initiatives. 108 would cap rates, I believe, and 50 would cap the amount of taxes any year that the government could collect on property taxes at 4% without
Right.
going back to voters.
Okay, so my search brought up something wrong then.
Yeah, so
I'm glad I
you
asked.
should look at those things. If a gentleman named Michael Fields with a group called, I think it's called Advanced Colorado, if I have that correct, he's the president, and he's, I think, one of the major drivers of these issues. and they're real simple to understand. They're not. It's gonna be really, really, I think, a challenge. Even with 238, that was this bipartisan tax cut bill that happened at the end of session. Even with that, what they're saying is, this is the citizens' tax cut. That's not really even a tax cut. It's an increase. Like, there's just a lot of politics going on around that. So just to bring that to your awareness. Okay. So first of all, do you want to hand out the sheet, Heather? Again, I know that this process will continue to improve this process. I know this was hard for some of you all, easier for others. Some of you, I think, struggled with, if we're doing the work, do we prioritize it? Like, how does that work and look? But I do appreciate you all, Heather and I appreciate you all going through this process to give us a starting point. And so,
Can I say what this is?
yes, say what this.
Okay. So in this survey that you all did, there were 20 items, and you were invited to rank them in order of importance to you. And then the software survey, the survey software weights the score based on how many people had it first, how many people had it second, how many people had it third. So these are listed in order from top to bottom. The top is the highest priority for the most people, relatively speaking. And then I included just the individual scores across those lines so you can see where everybody put it. You could probably guess which one is yours. I will say before we move on is the second question I asked you in that survey was, are there any items on this list that you just don't think we should talk about? And none of the items got 4 or more. So everything remains in the pool. So this is the complete list that we started with. Got several email questions about, aren't we doing some of those things anyway? That's what Rob's going to talk about. But the other thing I'll just stress is this is not a decision by any stretch of the imagination. This is a data and is a gateway to a conversation. So if you're troubled by the tool, troubled by the results, totally understand that, but just know that that's why we talk about it. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, so we will look both at our sheet and the board simultaneously, if you can do that. And let's go through the list. Now, the way, so these are topics that I think are both staff and board priorities. Staff has a few priorities and board has your priorities, and I've put them in the order that they're on this sheet. And I already have some things that are on the board. And let me talk you through why they're on there. Some of these things are commitments to our community. May and June, we have 2 more meetings. We need to do a long-range advisory committee update. The community needs that. We need to give the community an update on Heatherwood. So that is what we have for May 28th. On June 11th, we have to give our community a CBOC update. We have to give DAC an opportunity to present their UIP recommendations, and then the board has to share my evaluation. So information sessions for May 28th and June 11th, that's what we have there. I have my eval on the 28th for our conversation, and then we have superintendent's honor roll June 11th. Yes. It's the board you want to see, not me. I get it.
That was fun. It was great. I'm kind of lonely over here.
Got it. Okay. On August 13th, I have superintendent goal setting, which would be a great thing for us to talk about. And I want to do that early. Then we've got our first day session here on August 20th. Nothing on August 27th. We have September 10th, an update, CBOC update. Like the CBOC updates are on a rhythm, right? So our board knows what we're doing with this bond oversight. It's incredibly important. Then we have our big day session on declining enrollment. Right now, we have for the 24th, just a placeholder for agenda setting topic review, nothing else. October 8th is a long-range advisory committee Heatherwood update. Then again, strategic plan, UIP, metrics. On November 12th is an election update to let our community know what that means. And then the budget update and the budget outlook. And it's here because November 1st, the governor presents his initial budget. So we can talk to that here, and then we can also talk about election results. And then in December, mid-year eval, annual audit presentation, which is required, annual enrollment update, talking about the October count. This is the first step kind of it's a important part of the budget process. And then a more formal budget development process. Board members that have been on the board, you know that typically in September, we kind of did a budget presentation, and then it was repeated in December. I've gone ahead and stripped that away, for the sake of just trying to clear more room. And then December 17th, we have our day session and a superintendent's honor roll. Yep. So I just put UIP, strategic plan implementation review metrics. The idea that we have a presentation on the metrics, we have a presentation on the UIP, we have a separate presentation on the strategic plan implementation. We think all of those should be interconnected and presented at the same time in deep dives. We feel like that makes a lot more sense. And so that's kind of how I've framed it like that. So folks knew that there was more than one thing, and that these were, it's two magnets because they're longer sessions. This one? Yeah. So I'm so sorry. Blue is top blue is executive session. Bottom blue, special event. Green, work session. Yellow header, but green magnets, day sessions. Orange is information sessions. Those are presented from the podium, not in kind of work session. And then we have consent items, action, and study. And throughout, these are the things I didn't mention. We have to study and approve the budget. We have to study and approve the calendar. And then we have to do the Board of Education Director District Review for your zone, your district A, B. Is it A, B? Yeah, A, B, C, D. Every so often you have to review those.
First, I want to apologize for whispering to Jorge. Shouldn't be doing that in public meetings, whispering to people sitting next to us. I just said if everybody did their one-on-ones in Rob's office, they would see this. So I said that in jest. My concern on December 17th, since we have moved UIP to a day session, the superintendent's honor roll would be an evening meeting. Would we expect to come back for that purpose solely, and or should those two items together be reconsidered?
Yeah, I think we made an agreement we wouldn't do that. So what if we did this?
This is the magic of the magnets.
We could go. You want to get it toward the end of the semester only because kids that do great things in November, you want to conclude them in December. We could flip out my eval, and we could do that as part of this, if that works for everybody.
They're nodding.
Because that's not, typically mid-year eval is, hey, how's it going? How you feeling? It's not a formal process. It's more of an opportunity to have conversation. As I've shared with all of you all, every time you talk to me is like an evaluation conversation. Like every time we talk, you could share thoughts, ideas, concerns, right? The sooner I know, the better off I'm going to be in addressing those issues. So those conversations have been typically like, if there's any big hiccups during the year, we talk about those a little bit, if any really great successes, but it's not like an in-depth thing that you even really need to prepare that much for.
Do they give you candy?
No, I don't get candy. But I do. I can bring my own candy. But it also is going to be a check-in on kind of goal setting, right? Like so maybe So maybe it is a little bit more formal, but it doesn't take long to prepare. And I think that that works out just fine. Is everybody okay with that?
And we won't be voting, so it's fine.
Okay.
They were
All right.
nodding behind your back, so everything's fine.
Okay.
And Randy said December 10th.
Can you visually indicate the ones that we're not having?
Well,
So we
you
don't-
mean the day parties or the day sessions? I'm sorry.
I mean, because we're keeping the date.
Channeling my daughter.
Right.
My I don't know why I'm over here.
They're on the bottom right.
Yeah. All right. So, okay. So yeah, so we would do, like this, Jason. Does that help?
Nothing else going on.
Yeah.
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 Right, so we don't-
Gotcha.
Those are the day sessions, 9 to noons, and they're full now.
Yep. So now, yep, we're keeping the 18th, and we said we were keeping the 19th. All right. So, if you'll allow me, I'd like to start with staff because these are things that our staff thinks that are important and are typically in rhythm. And you can say, thumbs up, I don't know, thumbs down.
So you're making proposals?
Well, why don't I do this? Why don't I go with both first?
Okay.
Some of the both is already on here, right? So DAC, UIP, it's on here. Declining enrollment is on here. Academic calendar is on here. We've had multiple requests for an AI update. We're ready to provide that update. We can put it in early August. We can put it anywhere on the board that you all would like. I can put it somewhere and move it around later. Does anybody have a preference on how soon you want to hear about AI?
Can I ask how soon they could be ready? We may need to have a topic on the agenda for June 18th, and given the previous discussion about not having standalones, I was just wondering if that is too soon.
No, not for us. Too soon for you all?
Laura's got a thought?
I had AI update on the calendar agenda.
Oh, I know. But that's what I'm saying. We're getting ready, but these two are already pretty filled. Why don't we put it on June 18th as a work session topic? Is that cool? Everybody good with that? Ignore the orange. We'll change it to green after the meeting.
Can you just more slowly review the ones that you thought were already on there so we can check them off our lists?
Yes. Hold on one second. We have,
So the ones down by the right where you put on the side.
we have look at what student populations we are losing. Is there a trend? That would match up with what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Oh, academic calendar.
Okay, hold on. Academic calendar, that's second from the bottom.
Academic calendar is going to come to you for study on September 17th. And then you have to, by your own policy, you have to approve it by November.
Okay, so academic calendar, what else you got there on the right? In the little,
DAC UIP,
yep, got that one.
declining enrollment.
Mhm.
And then this one was a little more nuanced. Look at what student populations we are losing. Is there a trend? And we would plan to address that in the data review around declining enrollment.
Okay.
So that is captured.
To clarify, that can happen August 20th or September 17th, right? Or no, it's just September 17th.
What's that?
That's going to be September 17th. I was saying, could it have been August 20th, but it's going to be September 17th.
No, because you need to have it on September because we need to know who shows up to school, right? And then you want to do that after Labor Day. Typically, populations stabilize after Labor Day, depending upon where they're moving from, because a lot of places start after Labor Day. So,
Hold on, Laura's got a thought on that one.
yeah. Well, he's going to have to plan on presenting that on June 18th.
He's excited about it.
Yeah, he couldn't, he just texted me. He can't wait.
So is there,
I'm just
is there
joking.
a trend on who we're losing? Is that what's on our list as enrollment and trends?
Yeah, because it comes part of this declining enrollment data review, right? Like we've typically said, hey, we're declining, but we haven't said what kids are losing, what schools are losing kids. And our team is in the process of developing a dashboard that will be a really great tool for us to analyze that. So,
Okay, cool.
all right. So these two, we have a couple that are tricky. We have evaluate mental health and SEL programs. And so we have been in conversation with Renee Crown Wellness Institute, and they have agreed to do the study for us. I do not yet have a date on once their evaluation would be done, right? So I would, if I'm going to place it, I could place it towards November, December, but it will be contingent upon them finishing the review.
Okay. Alex?
Yeah, I guess part of what I'm interested in is some dialogue with them at some point, maybe before they're done with the review, to figure out what it is they're measuring or what it is they think their outcomes are that they're looking for.
Okay.
So,
Like a methods conversation first?
yeah, to find out what they think the scope is and what they're trying to do, because I guess or we could get that in materials or something along the way.
Yeah, I think that, they have a co-design process. We shared with them directly the recommendations made by our Title IX committee. And so they're using that as a base as they're developing the study. And like if we wait, it might hold them up. Like you could put it somewhere here, see if they'd be available and willing to come in and talk around kind of what that looks like. Then it's just going to push the results out further. Or I can share with you all collectively what it is that they're proposing based on the recommendations from the Title IX committee, who I know worked really hard on kind of thinking about that.
So
With the idea that these are trusted partners, right? The inputs, the outputs are only as good as the inputs, right? Like, so we want to make sure that we've asked them to look at and think about the right questions. My instincts are wait till the review is done and bring that forward. But if there's collective board interest on thinking about that prior to, right, then we would move it somewhere over here. But I would have to check with them and see when they're available.
Melania?
Did the Title IX Advisory Council just give questions associated with sexual violence prevention, or were they doing mental health overall?
They gave me a list of recommendations, right, when I met with them like 2 months ago, right? When I was in that meeting, they were asking for an external reviewer, and they'd actually selected somebody that they would prefer come and do the analysis of Title IX. At the meeting, what I shared with them is we have a great data sharing agreement and partnership with the Renee Crown Wellness Institute, and I felt like that this would be in good alignment with the recommendations, is because we already had an existing agreement and there's grant dollars there, that and then we wouldn't have to go out to do an RFP, right? Because if it's over $50,000, I can't just hire somebody anyways, unless you all change that policy. So then we went to Renee Crown. Renee Crown actually had one of their lead researchers who had popped into a couple of the Title IX meetings. And so we were asking, was that going to be an issue, a challenge? But they'd only popped in. They weren't substantially members of the Title IX Advisory Committee. So we felt like that they would still qualify as a solid researcher. And I think Thursday, Laura is meeting to finalize where they are at in regards to the process. So I would ask the board, what information do you need before we proceed? I don't want to proceed with a study if you want to get your hands on what the research questions might be prior to doing that. I don't know that that becomes to the board. I think that can be, I could share out and you could give me feedback and meet with anybody who has any concerns or questions. I don't know that that's a board topic, but I'll leave that up to you all to discuss.
Alex?
I guess, well, there's multiple mental health related elements that aren't explicitly brought out. So I'm afraid that they all get folded into the Renee Crown evaluation, when I know that we actually probably need a more sophisticated conversation about neurodiversity, bullying, suicide prevention, and Title IX. And so I'm conscious of putting a lot of eggs in the Renee Crown evaluation, with expectations for things that we'd get information about that would stimulate our discussions as a board. So without I'd love to see what other materials there are about it, to see what that scope is or how it would work. But I know we're going to have a proposed neurodiversity policy in a very active community that wants to deal with it. And so I don't know how to know what the Renee Crown work does on 3 or 4 really weighty topics that aren't on this list otherwise.
So a couple of things. Neurodiversity policy is on staff list. I felt like that it didn't get on the priority list for the board, but I felt like that it was a priority based on kind of my interactions with you all. And I have Title IX sexual violence prevention as a specific topic that was prioritized about midway through for the board. So those things are captured. I didn't have on the list bullying, or what was the other thing that you talked about?
Suicide prevention.
Suicide prevention. I didn't have those as prioritized topics that came up during agenda setting. So we don't have those. I don't know that all of those, I think that you're right. I don't think all of those are going to be within the scope of an evaluation. I wouldn't pretend that would be the case, right? But to the extent that the board wants to have a conversation around bullying and a conversation around suicide prevention, we could add it to the list now. Again, we've got a lot of things to go through on the list. We could queue that up for our September 24th meeting to take a look at it then. But I'd turn it to the board and Heather to facilitate a discussion on the board on what you all.
Okay. So neurodiversity is on the list. We'll hear about that in a minute. Thoughts or suggestions related to how we might treat these additional items, bullying and suicide prevention?
When I saw this on the list, I kind of assumed it would be more, that's part of it, the Renee Crown thing, but not the entirety of the discussion. And so I don't know what that looks like, whether it's kind of an overview of our programs and our responses and our metrics. And then at some point down the road, we get the evaluation of those things. But I hope that it's not, our priority item is not limited to just the evaluation discussion. That's my sense of it. I don't know, open to what others want to say about that. But that, and also just if it is going to be, if we're not going to get results until the fall, we are pushing off a topic of huge importance to the board and the community to a discussion based on a result that we'll get, in almost a year's time or 6 months' time. So,
Yep.
I will say that we did give a review around mental health this semester, right? So, and this is something I think we've given an update to the public on every year for the past multiple years, right? Because it's a very timely topic. I guess the question I would have for the board to contemplate is, are you wanting an overview of what we're doing? Do you want to have a discussion on the topic? Do you want to figure out like data points to inform a discussion on the topic? I mean, to have the topic is certainly important to the community. It's reflected in our budget. I think to some extent reflected in our strategy. The question would be, by putting that on either a work session or an information item, like what do you hope to accomplish? How does it inform the work? And does that have to happen before you engage another entity to do a deep dive into the effectiveness of our SEL mental health programs? Or do you do that parallel, knowing and understanding that if you had new thoughts or ideas, then they couldn't fold it into the study unless you did a whole nother study?
Alex, what was your vision of the doing that would get did on bullying or suicide prevention?
To be honest, one of the reasons I wanted to have the discussion about the research earlier is that I believe our SACs and our DACs could expand their analysis of school climate and mental health issues if we presented to them, some thoughtful feedback on what sort of metrics are possible. And then what the strengths and weaknesses are of the different metrics and data that we have on hand, so that we could have school-based discussions about school climate that would be informed by the same kind of data that we're looking at as a district. So I am interested in supporting just more people having informed discussions about how mental health is playing out in their own school amongst the community. So that's one agenda item for me that I'd like us to achieve somehow. And the other one is I do want to, as a board, address bullying and understand where we are on it. I'm concerned that our metrics are probably not very accurate at all based on some of my original analysis of it. So and I don't feel like it would be addressed. I mean, it's certainly part of looking at mental health, but I'd love us to Jason's point, to be able to have a chance to talk about it.
Nicole?
Did you want to respond first?
Yeah, no, so as a discussion point or as a presentation from staff, like what's the rhythm we're talking about? Like, these are community issues. I think that's well established, right? Is it that the board has ideas that we're not looking at the right information? Is that a collective thought of the board? Is it that with bullying and mental health, that there's a stigma around reporting it, and that it's just, even if we shared with you what was reporting, it's underreported? Like, is it, what are we doing when kids are bullying and how are we responding? I would say that around bullying, bullying in particular, we are working on metrics that would be part of this, right? But it'd be limited to the information that we have, right? So to the extent that there's a lot of unreported bullying, probably unreported mental health issues, probably, right? And to get to the root cause of those things is a whole different conversation, and it's a resource conversation, and it's a philosophy conversation on how deep and how wide do you go around some of these topics. And so I hear that you want to talk about it and you want SAC to talk about it. I'm just trying to think, what would that look like? If it's data that we're looking for, we can have conversations in advance when we talk about the data that we're proposing here on August 20th to say, yeah, Rob, I'd really like this, that, and the other thing. Whatever those data points might be, can we chase them down, make them part of this? And then we could put that into the data calendar. Like, if it's data, we could. If it's to the extent of some of these other issues, I'm just trying to think how it would drive staff action. I would just need a little more clarity.
Is there a version of the world just where you would provide the scope and the methods that you have writtenly from the contractor people whose name I forgot?
Renee Crown Wellness.
Thank you. And then do what you just talked about at the data meeting. And then if there was a further conversation that was wanted, then you could discuss whether and how to proceed with that on September 24th. Do those pieces, just as a sequence of events, does that?
I
does
think
make
that,
sense?
that we could do that.
Okay.
So piggybacking on this conversation, there are multiple tools we already have and information we have that is captured. So the SACs should have been discussing, have already discussed their school culture and climate survey, which includes questions such as these. The DAC could certainly look at that. Those are data points we have available. We have the Healthy Kids Colorado survey results that have some of this. I would be hesitant without having the board without all members of the board having a full understanding of the types of information we're already collecting and that we have, having a conversation about what more do we need until we know what we have. And so I would, in addition to what are we proposing with Renee Crown, I mean, as with everything, it's a body of evidence. And so what is the body of evidence that exists before we start to tinker with Renee Crown? Maybe we don't need to add things because they already exist somewhere else. So I just wanted to elevate that because everybody might not be aware that those things are in play. So just tossing it out.
And they may not go for that. Like, researchers, if you mess with their methodology, they may not do it. The other thing is, I get a sense from comments here and just comments from board members that anecdotal data is not matching up with the system-wide data that we're collecting. Like, that you're hearing stories of things that are happening that when you look at them globally based on the information we're collecting are not as pervasive as an issue as you're hearing from the stories from folks that are affected negatively. And I think that there's going to be a level of disconnect potentially with personal issues and stories individualized and when you look at those things globally. And so to the extent that we dig into that issue and challenge, I do think, Nicole, to your point, on the 20th, we could say, look, here's all the stuff we collect. Here's what it says. And then we could say, yeah, Rob, but I'm hearing A, B, C, D, and E. Like, what are other ways that you could do this, right? Do you pull focus groups? Do you target individual schools? Do you people and then how much resource would that take? And do we have the resource? And then if we do that, so what? Then what? How are we going to change our practices? How do we change our training? And does that take away from our big day meetings where we're digging into all these things? Does it support it? So I think to have that conversation, you'd need to see what we have, what we collect, and what it says. And then you could mash that up against the anecdotal stories of stakeholders and individuals that are coming forward. And we could come up and develop a plan either on the 20th, and then we could bring that back when we met again on the 15th.
So if folks want to hop in.
I just wanted to clarify to make sure, I wasn't suggesting that that stuff gets rolled up into Renee Crown.
Right.
That it stays
right.
distinctly different.
Yeah,
And I agree,
that's right.
I wouldn't want to tinker with their methodologies. I think if they have a plan.
Well, we have a data sharing agreement
Yeah.
and a partnership. And I think to the extent that you start to try to, they just won't do it. They'll just walk away. I think they're extending themselves to do this for us. So
All right,
Perfect.
Jorge, Lelania, and then Kitty, and then Beth, and then Alex.
I just kind of want to reiterate Nicole's point about, because I know the DAC's going to be reporting at the June 11th meeting, right? And they'll be giving us recommendations on the UIP. And that will touch on a lot of these issues, I think. But I'd like to hear kind of what their perspective is. Because I know they're looking at metrics. They've been working on that for a while now in terms of what we're tapping, what we're not tapping. That would be really useful. And I like the idea of putting it all into the August 20th meeting to kind of get a sense of where we're at with information that we have. I'm just a little confused about what the Renee Crown Institute is doing with the Title IX recommendations and how that overlaps with the mental health SEL stuff, because it seems that they're not congruent. And so just the information for us to have in terms of where they're going would be useful.
And so the scope of the Renee Crown study, based on earlier feedback, from board members, was to evaluate the effectiveness of our SEL programming and dig into how are we responding to Title IX concerns, issues, and challenges as brought up by our Title IX. Yeah, but they said they could do both of them parallel at the same time. Right. And so we said, look, these are the things we're interested in. You are a trusted partner. We have a data sharing agreement. We've gone through pretty significant lengths to establish that. So you have a researcher in your backyard who can dial up, right, who knows the community and can figure that out. And so, I can get more specifics on what they're proposed. You know how this goes. They're going to have a proposed design. We provide feedback to the extent that the board, you want to see a copy of that. We can certainly do that. And we can make recommendations to do that again. But if we wait until, the question is timing. When I met with the Title IX committee, they felt like they'd been on the shelf for a little while. They felt like they'd had been bringing up issues, and the issues they wanted the issues addressed immediately. And I get it. And so there's a level of urgency there that I want to be responsive to. At the same time, to get everything totally perfect and include everything, you'd have to push some of that out to get more information. And so it's a choice we have.
Lelania?
I, as somebody who worked really hard to bring that recommendation forward to have us look at those issues with Renee Crown, I would not like to prolong that and combine it with something else. And yet I am very aware that I would like to see more metrics around suicide prevention, around bullying. And so if we're going to see those from DAC, and then we're going to see them again on August 20th, I think maybe my suggestion might be that if you could find a way to let us know what we will see on those days around these mental health issues, meaning these are what we're going to learn about bullying. You're not going to know the numbers, of course, but here's what we're going to present about. If there are things board members want to see that aren't included, maybe we can be sure that they're included by that August 20th date.
I'm trying. So all of this is new work. I have not. The way that I do this is I talk with you all first. You are the board. You are my first team, right? To be very clear, right? So we work as a team together, and then once I know what we want to do, then I go to staff and I'll go to cabinet tomorrow and begin to start unpacking some of these things, right? So to the extent that I'm not sure when I'd have that information, Lelania, because again, the idea of this idea formulated collectively with us, this wasn't something I had in my back pocket that so like I'll need to think through that in addition to landing negotiations, landing the budget, finishing up graduations this week, and then letting some folks get some rest on vacation. So I don't want to overcommit on that, but I hear what you're saying. I think the big ideas would be what information we have around the issues that I know that this board cares about and align with our strategic plan. Bullying, right? Suicide, risk prevention, Title IX issues. And again, I do think that the tension is going to be between the data that we collect is dependent on self-reporting oftentimes, and there is a culture that creates underreporting that is at the underbelly of what we're trying to fix. And so like the data doesn't, showing you the data doesn't say, hooray, we don't have any issues, or oh my God, like there's more to it. And I get that. That's where I think maybe some of the analysis from Renee Crown can help, and also other ways to collect information beyond just, you know, pulling the data from the data warehouse that we collect in risk reviews and things like that.
I got 3 folks who want to jump in, and then we should figure out what we're going to do with this item. And we got so many other things to talk about. Kitty, are you okay?
No, and that's why I'm leaving.
Okay. Okay, go rest. I'm so sorry. Be well. Okay. Oh. Okay, go rest. That's more important. All right, we'll miss you. Okay.
us to get somebody to drive you?
No.
You got it?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Beth and then Alex.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in.
Get her a ride home. Don't let her, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in, and it's kind of delayed at this point, but I wanted to support what I'm hearing as a suggestion to have a deep dive data conversation on August 20th. I think that's a great idea. I really like that. What I don't want to see happen, and what can happen at times, having gone through this a few times, is that a topic gets put out there and then we have an update about it. And honestly, that's not, we don't need another mental health update necessarily. It's an important topic, but I don't feel like having an update really gets to the work that I think this board is trying to do. Does that make sense? So I am supportive of the idea of this being a data dive, getting in a way to not just hear kind of the more superficial information, but the deeper information, and then being able to have a robust conversation that can provide action to staff.
I think that this report will provide more questions than answers, right? Like if we're being honest, and I will say though, that it's important to note that we are doing a lot of things. Now, whether we're doing the right things or not, that's what the analysis hopefully tells you, right? Right. But to the extent that there's times for work sessions, there's times for information reporting, and there's also time for decision making on a topic that can get super deep, super quick. And in an era of declining resources and competing resources, right, can create real tough choices when everybody is going to say, yes, I want that and that and that and that. Will you give up this to have that? The conversation may change. And a lot of districts, especially districts tight on cash, don't do like a tenth of what we do around mental health and support.
Alex and then Jason.
Yeah, I'm feeling good about the way you're setting it up and framing it. And I feel like one of the reasons, to Nicole's point, there's a ton of data out there now and a ton of different people involved in processes where it's sort of tangential or can be a deep part of what they're doing. And I think we as a board, by getting our update and having the Renee Crown stuff, can sort of inform or at least add to the people who are working at it at school level, whether it's in their SAC or whatever the unit it is. So I feel like that's good. But to Beth's point, I think we totally will have a future to-do list that should come out of it. And part of what I like about the whole asking them to it is to find out other things we're doing now that we shouldn't be, right? So I really do feel like in the modern world of mental health and school stuff, there's stuff to do that's harmful. So it really is, like, I have no idea what they'll come up with, but I'm hoping our discussion will let them be more sophisticated about the data at school level and then feed school level action too. So that's what I'm motivated by.
But I'm hearing two competing priorities. I'm hearing Lelania say go, and I'm hearing you say wait until you have that. So,
You want to clarify what you said?
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing about the study when it happens, but I'm also, as part of the UIP update, that can be part of that deep dive. Is that contradictory?
if we want to move fast, I can get you what they're proposing. Like I shared, you can kind of give feedback, do that. And then we can get going. So at the beginning of the year, right, we get going. Or you can wait until after we present the data on the 20th, if there's new findings, wonderings, curiosities, and then you can have that information to put you about a month behind. If they have the scope, and because right now they're probably planning something different. So
I'd be satisfied myself by just having more fleshed out sense of what they're proposing to do.
Just to see it, but not discuss it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then if we'll have the opportunities to talk about mental health along the way.
All right, Jason, and then Nicole. Okay, we don't need to worry about Kitty. We're okay? Okay, great. Jason,
I'm okay.
you're good? Okay, Nicole? Yep.
write down, speak up, like
Yeah, right.
move back. I'm running out of arms.
So one thing I'm wondering about, and I want some clarity around, is we haven't yet discussed the UIP or exactly what's going to be included in the strategic plan and those metrics. And I would like some clarity so there's not any misconceptions around any type of data that we're looking. Not all data, or maybe we're saying all data that we have interest in will be discussed at those touch points, whether or not they're related to the strategic plan or the UIP, or are we under the assumption that the strategic plan and UIP have all of these things? I just don't know how, as I'm thinking about time and level of involvement, I don't want to set up false expectations if some things aren't actually part of those topics that are listed. And making sure we have for sure enough time for that first, because it is our statutory obligation to approve a UIP, and strategic plan is kind of vital to our work. I just want to make sure we're not over mixing things that might not be exactly the same.
You know, ideally you make everybody's hopes and dreams come true, but that probably won't happen. So that's why I mean, to the extent that things align with climate and culture, right, and things we care about, right? You know, to the extent that we're committed to creating metrics that are aligned to those big goals, right? If there's things here that aren't reflected but are still important, I would suggest that they go here, right? To the 24th, and then we could loop in. And we'll be having a work session. We can have a conversation on, Rob, you didn't provide this. By the time we meet in October, you know, how do you add this to the academic or to the data calendar that you have? What does it look like? Do you think it's a good idea, a bad idea? I'll ask the question, what problem are you trying to solve? If I dig through all this, what will it tell you? If the issue is under-reporting, right, and I give you all the reports we have, and you see them, and everybody says, yeah, but those aren't true, is it worth doing, right? Like, I think those would be the conversations that we'd have.
So based on that conversation, you'll send the Renee Crown scope. That's what you told Laura. She'll send it around.
So Laura Dela Cruz is meeting with them this week. I'm going to kind of scoop that back up, and I'll circle back to the board and let you know kind of where those things are.
So we started down this path because we still have a hanging thread over here, which was where to put this item based on that conversation. I think we were gonna.
So I'm going to plop it down here on November 19th. Would this be a work session or an information topic for the board? Looking at the evaluation from Renee Crown.
Oh, I was gonna say you plopped it on a blue date, which would be a work session.
I know.
Was it a question or a?
Yes, question.
But both.
Yeah.
Question, suggestion. It's a,
Is a leading question.
yeah, a
I
little
would
bit.
assume we would need to have, this board would want a work session.
Considering the topics about not wanting information items on this topic, I
Okay, good. Okay.
made an executive decision to plop
All
that
right.
in the blue lane.
All right.
Now, if we get it back in time, if not, we'll have to adjust.
Sure. Okay. That was we had one more on the both list.
This is graduation requirements. Remember, we decided we were going to create a task force. So this would be a work session or an information item. An information item might work because they're just giving you an update on where things are. Or a work session might be helpful because you want to dig into where things are. Either way,
I I hear one case for update. Nicole?
I would second that. We kind of had a work session. I think it'd be good to, after that work session, have an update to see where we are before we decide if we need to go back.
Okay.
So information update would be good. Information item.
Update on tentatively for October 22nd.
Concerns? Cool, okay.
I just hope, yes.
If we expect to have that implemented, it has to be fully adopted in order to get the course catalog done for January registration
So then the 22nd works.
as info, and we need to adopt soon after.
Yep, that gives us 1, 2 actual board meetings. You could go study, then action. It gives you 2 weeks between in presenting the information to go study, then we can tweak, hone, do whatever, and then go to action.
That's one where we have a ton of stakeholder groups doing stuff in parallel, right?
Yep,
Will that be okay? Does that timeline work with all those parties?
I think that's why we have to push it out to October, because it gives us as much space and time.
Great.
Yes, and we have the task force assembled and the dates are identified. Robin Fernandez has that, so we expect to be on that timeline.
Sweet.
Okay.
Now,
I'm going to pop one of these off here that I think that we probably need to talk about sooner rather than later, and that's the neurodiversity policy. I do think that the board should talk about, to the extent, is this a policy? Is this a resolution, more of a statement of direction for the district, or does it sit better in policy? I think it's coming forward to you as a policy. As a reminder, around this time last year, we had a BVSD Connects where we filled up this entire room with parents with concerns around neurodiversity. We had another listening session where for 4 hours, a lot of really good parents poured their hearts out to us on some of the challenges and issues. In response to that, we developed an autism advisory group, and they've been working very collaboratively with us over the past year to do a few things, create more trainings, create more awareness. And it is their strong hope and desire that the board can take some action, whether it's policy or resolution. I don't know if they know the nuance or difference to that. I would leave that for the board to decide. But I would think that this would be something that you would want to tackle. You could probably get it done before you leave for the summer to address it in a work session. We have June 11th. We have May 28th. They have a policy that for you all to consider. But I think before you leave would relieve some of the angst from this group.
is that what you're going to say, Lillian? Okay. Does that sound right to folks? Okay. So anyone have a preference for June 11th? Okay. Anyone troubled by that? All right. Fantastic. Yep. Uh-huh.
What is the process for a kind of pre-drafted policy, and how does that go through you, and what does that look like? I mean, not.
Sure, and I did through Michelle Brenner, who's our Executive Director of Special Education, just provide a little bit of information about policies and resolutions and how they go together. I'm expected as legal counsel to put it into the structure that the board identifies as the vehicle you think is appropriate. And then to make sure we use and honor as much of that community work as possible, as long as it aligns with state law and the values of this board.
Yep. Lillian?
May I have the distinguishing characteristics of a resolution? I understand what a policy is, but I'd like to understand a resolution thoroughly.
Sure, and we did adopt a number of resolutions last year. So resolutions are really the board's pronouncement or statement in writing of values or recognizing events. We did, for example, in the last handful of years, the board adopted a resolution recognizing the decade of work that the school district had dedicated to making sure our students who are transgender and gender nonconforming are recognized and valued as members of our community. That was one place. The Green New Deal was also adopted as a resolution. So they tend to just consist of several value statements, whereas this has happened, whereas clauses, and then there's a directive at the end. The board directs that we honor and we celebrate through different events. And so it is directive. It's also housed on board docs in your library of materials. It just isn't housed in our policy bank in the same way.
When we moved away from SROs, that was a resolution. And it directed the staff and it gave specific timelines on this is what you'll do. We don't have SROs, so.
All right. Ready to move on to the next one?
Okay, couple more staff ones. Impact on Ed has typically done an annual recap of what they do. They have never given us more resources than they're doing today. That I think Allison wanted to get in before the end of the year. I don't see a space there, but we could offer up coming on August 13 to kick off the year. If you all would be just in a quick information session. It's important for her for awareness, for her board. She has a separate board of directors to know and understand the partnership, and a great way to recognize what they do today versus what they did 6 years ago is night and day. They used to throw a couple parties, do back crayons to calculators, and now they've funded all of our wellness centers. When we came up short on counselors, they found the money for us. They're doing really, really good work. So I would propose that we put them in on an info session on August 13th.
Anyone troubled? Oh, we're good. Next.
We are cooking. This is a board option. Take it or leave it. Would you like a hiring update? Typically, we've been doing this and reporting out on who we've hired, what positions. It is for information only. If you didn't want to have this, we could give you an executive summary. It doesn't have to be a board presentation. Or if you think it's important for our public to continue to know our hiring efforts around people of color, it is aligned to our strategic plan. Or we could put this and weave it into our August 20th data calendar and report that out in a different way. Those are some options for y'all.
I would love an executive summary.
Okay, Beth?
I also think an executive summary is a good idea, but I do think that Rob's point about highlighting to the community where we're able to make progress in hiring folks of color is really important. So I am cognizant of that as well. And so I'm a little bit leaning towards putting it in, I guess, to August 20th. Is that what I'm hearing, Rob, when you say that?
That was it. Yeah, that was a suggestion.
Okay.
No, not on August 20th. It would be the 27th.
27th, during a business meeting.
Or September 10th.
Okay. Jorge's got a thought?
Yeah, I think there's something that needs to be public facing. That was one of the big things of the review of the strategic plan was that we had made a net increase of like 4 staff or teachers of color. And I think we need to keep focus on that.
Okay.
Definitely early in the year.
Nicole?
We're currently in a hiring freeze.
Nope, we lifted it.
Oh, good. We have cut, so we shook out some positions to get to the COLA. The budget forecast doesn't look good. I just want to make sure we don't have rose-colored glasses on what we can do around hiring in this current conditions. It's not that we can't keep the focus on hiring staff of color. I think it's really important. And it has that really big asterisk that I think when we present it publicly, some of that reality, the reality is the bulk of our tenured staff are not, our tenured teaching staff are not teachers of color. And those are the ones that are with us, that will be with us the longest. And so I think as we continue to, if we continue to have these conversations publicly, that message just also needs to be included. And I don't want to put ourselves in a place where people are really disappointed because of the ways in which our hands may or may not be tied by the budget complications.
Laura, you look like you had a thought.
We do, but we haven't been giving the hiring update because we hire up to Labor Day as we have last minute vacancies and things of that. So we've been giving, end of August, beginning of September is when we separated out the hiring update.
Jason, you have a thought on this one? Written or publicly presented on the 27th.
Yeah, those are good. I mean, I kind of was leaning towards publicly presenting just for the reasons Jorge mentioned, but Nicole's points are, I understand those points. So is there something we do in back to school time or during back to school time that this would fit neatly within that?
Imperfectly, but
No, it wouldn't fit neatly, just because we won't have all the data. Let me give you all some options. And a word of caution. We have been committed to equity work pretty significantly. You know, we're having some turnover in our equity department, which is leading to some questions of, are we still doing equity? What's happening? Which of course we are. We're in the process of hiring a new director. You know, the public is accustomed to some information as a rhythm, right? We have not been making the progress we want to here. And we also have been looking at it in kind of a way that I think Shelley in her review of some of our data suggested that if it's always disproportionality, how do you show some of the growth? So there might be different ways. I would propose two things: an exec summary, August 20th, an August 20th data presentation, and then Laura, write this down. I could add it either August 27th or September 10th in my superintendent comments. That'd be that's what you call a 3-for-1. You like that? So if that's okay with everybody, that's what we'll do. So I'm going to put this here, exec summary here. I made a little category here, but Laura, make those notes.
I guess I'm with Jorge in terms of maintaining the public-facing nature of it. And I guess one of the things I might say that might help with that is, again, sort of having some public version of the executive summary that's like a freestanding document that like SACs can discuss and the media can see. Just think of a consumable as part of that.
We can post that to superintendent's comments when I make those comments. And I will say, you know, it was a priority for us. It was an interest for the district during negotiations. We'll be able to lift that up then, where we've reduced the number of mandatory interviews of tenured teachers when we have vacancies from 3 to 2 with an MOU to continue to study that. So we have some progress there, but stubborn data to move. And we have, the moves we've made have not resulted in what we were hoping for. And we've done a bunch of different things. One year it got so frustrated, we just hired a bunch of teachers of color and placed them. And none of them lasted, right? Because they weren't onboarded in a way that the cultures were accepting, because it didn't work well. And then, you know, James, I think, has done a good job of keeping his foot on the gas to the extent that we can. So, but I think that we could solve all three with what I've proposed.
Love it. Next.
At some point, I think it would make sense for us to update our community on how our new UPK rollout has gone, right? A, to inform the board and public, and B, to more promos to, hey, we're doing UPK, sign your kids up for UPK. UPK and BVSD is the best as a strategy around increasing enrollment and increasing all the things that we, just increasing enrollment, increasing achievement. So we could put this October 22nd. Starts in like January. So it gives you a little bit of space here if you do it in October, if you're all good with that.
Good.
Okay. Again, we're putting everything up on here, but if we get to the list and you're like, I like this better than that thing, we take it off, we switch the magnets out, and there you go.
As Nicole said, it's the beauty of the magnet.
All righty. Okay. I think you all want to talk about cell phones.
I've heard something about
Cell phone policy. Like beginning of the year rather than later, because it's going to take some time. Yeah, well, but I knew you were doing that. So
Could we do it at the end of this year?
no. I mean, no. I just run out of time. We could. I'm thinking August 27th, and as a work session topic, right? Because you all know you want to talk about it, right? We're going to have some conversation about it, because to the extent that there's tons of passion in this room about a cell phone policy, I could tell you that when we dig in there, there's going to be folks who aren't so keen on it. And we're going to have to think about that and navigate that potentially.
No to June 25th?
I don't know that we're going to be meeting June 25th. I think that's a, hey, if you, yeah,
The 25th is if
like emergency, something happens with the budget, so one of our associations rejects, doesn't ratify their contracts we put forward. It's like an emergency.
some of them were looking at me askance when I said we're probably going to meet the 18th, because typically we. Jason?
Is there any other opportunity? I know there's a interest in doing the AI update in June. I mean, I feel like we should, to have an initial touch-up point on this, it doesn't need to be super detailed, but at least an information item on what's the current policy, what do schools do currently. I do feel like we need to have some touch of this before the end of the school year. Yep.
So somebody who, whenever I get a board email about cell phone policy, I give them our policy and our regulation. They're always like, I didn't know my students were supposed to have that phone off and away, actually, according to board policy. So one thing I think would actually be helpful that is how is that policy being implemented right now, and how does that differ between schools and at school levels? And because I think it is implemented very differently at different schools. And some of it is in accordance with our policy and some of it is not. So I think that would actually be helpful information to guide our discussion on any potential policy changes, which is why I would advocate for kicking it out into next year if we could get our hands on some of that information.
The way that I look at this, even if we talk about it June 25th, you're not getting anything done for next year. And you're going to have to come back and folks are going to forget what we talked about, whether it's, the public is not really tuned in on June 18th, right? What's that? No. You're not going to get away with passing something that folks aren't engaged in. Here'd be my recommendation. And to your point, we have 2 days of school left. I could tell you that something like cell phone policy is not a policy issue. It's an enforcement issue. And what does it take to enforce a policy that kids will hate and parents might not all support? And I think about, some of the things that some of our schools are doing that are the right thing, but folks don't have the buy-in. They decided it because it's the right thing, and how those things work. You get lots of blowback and pushback. You cannot cheat process in our community. So to the extent I know this is a number one passion, this was number one on the list, I think you'd be best served starting it in August with this work session, putting our organization on notice that this is such a priority for this board, that folks need to get ready. We can begin to signal, based on your feedback today, to principals to begin to prepare and start to understand and know and understand. On the 27th, we can talk about our policy, but we're going to have to be thinking about the levels of engagement that we've been talking about around graduation and attendance policy, other big things you move and change. If you'd hope to have a policy that could be enforced. That'd be my recommendation. If you want to move that to the 18th and have a conversation on it, and move AI to the 27th, I would leave that up to the will of the board. I wouldn't advise it.
Good? Little eye? Okay. Great.
Okay. Fees, impact, waiver, prioritization of participation. So we touched fees, and this was a topic that folks really cared about. And it really talks about how our waivers of fees impacting prioritization. I think this is yours, Alex, so talk us through this.
Yeah, this is more trying to figure out the equity of all the fun things that people pay fees for, and find out who's actually participating demographically, who's paying the fees, and where the fees are an obstacle to participation for folks we'd like to have school be fun for? So yeah, so this is an issue where we need to generate data in order to have discussions, but I still want to move forward the idea that our current structure appears to have obstacles to access that we should know more about. And again, this is one where I'd like to have enough data to drive discussions at school level, where people are saying, hey, this is a really inclusive school. And then they look back at all their fun things and see how uninclusive they are. This is a priority for me. I think it gets at our schools being welcoming and inclusive, and that we won't have any more information if we don't change our approach in order to actually have it.
Melania?
Kathleen, is this where booster clubs sit in these?
What kind of clubs?
Booster.
Thank you for that question. So this, I understand this particular fee issue to be the non-academic fees, because the board updated the academic fees last year. So we'd be looking at the IGDA and related policies, student activities, student organizations. The booster club question is not actually in policy. It is something we will be addressing through a memo before the start of next year. Through a memo to our athletic directors about making sure that the booster clubs in our schools that have gender segregated activities, that we are making sure that all of those operations comply with the law. So it'll be two pieces. Yes, making sure that the way we collect and issue complies with Title IX, and then also making sure that the athletic and activity fees in general are appropriate and equitable.
Nicole's got a thought, and then Alex has a thought? Or did you not have a thought? You look thoughty.
My thought was, I think these policies are really important to discuss. And 2/3 of our athletics budget is funded from the general fund. So I want to be really clear on how much the fiscal impact of potential changes. Everybody that wants to participate, cost should not be a hindrance. And there are a lot of families that can pay to participate, and balancing that with the entirety of our budget is just something I don't want to lose track of. So as the topic was framed very directional, and I wanted to leave it a little bit more open in the conversation to make sure that if we have this will have fiscal implications, and I want to make sure we don't lose sight of that, and we're really aware of any potential trade-offs.
Rob is really excited about the night.
Well, because the magnets are just starting to flow. So this is something that also the board had a collective priority on, which is fiscal notes on policy procedures to assess budget impact. So, right, so if we're going to sequence these, you'd want to have a conversation about this before you'd have the conversations on policies that could reduce fees. Right, so not to say you would do it or wouldn't do it, that it's a transparent choice of resources, right? So if we did this, and Kathleen, okay, these are the policies that we're talking about. Kathleen, just type these up. Thank you, Kathleen. That was very good.
Really nice banner quality.
Oh, yeah, look at that. That's yeah. So we could do the fiscal notes. Kathleen, when do you want to, like, when could you have this conversation, right? Because this is a policy. Yeah, the fiscal note on policy procedure. And would it be a study session on, so to clarify for everybody, if we make a policy change, from what I understand, Nicole, and you can explain this, but here's how much it will cost the district if we make this policy change, estimate.
Yeah, and I was also thinking through cell phones. It's been floated. We use Yonders or those things. That has a fiscal, that there is a line item in our budget that would be, if our policy said we're going to lock up devices in some way, there would be a fiscal, not that we're suggesting that today, but when we talk about policy that might have a budgetary implication, whether it's one time or ongoing, the board needs to be informed so they can have
the best information available to make those trade-offs, particularly as we're going into a future where our finances are going to be more constrained. So does that make sense? I don't know if it's like a one time, but it's a touch point. For me, I was thinking like a touch point whenever we have a conversation about a change in policy or process or procedure that has a potential financial impact, that we bring that information forward, because at the end of the day, we are a very large business with a finite budget.
So we can do a couple of things with this. You can talk about this publicly. We can make some space and time. You can give this today as direction to staff as we think about new policy, that we embed this big idea into it.
How about we pause? Are there, yes, do that.
That we just do this as a form of practice. So I will just then give this to Kathleen.
Fantastic. So that
There you go.
back.
To the policies that are around fees related that are not academic fees.
Hold on one second. Alex, a clarifying comment.
Yeah, I just want to, I'm in support of Melania's comment about the booster club stuff too. I mean, my motivation is not about fees. My motivation ultimately is about the equity of access to what makes school fun. And I know how much the booster, I spent the whole time my son was in the marching band trying to get the booster club for the Fairview Marching Knights to say up front, we will make it possible for anybody to participate in this marching band who can't afford to do so. And I couldn't get them to do it in 4 years of trying. So I think we have potential to sort of set out policies for the booster clubs that say that if we're going to have booster clubs, we want to make a commitment that any sport that's benefiting from it has this kind of statement up front. So I think in the same way we would have fiscal implications of any policy discussion we would have, but around the waivers, we will need to understand what's going. And I'm interested in informing discussions, though, as long as it takes to get to the point where people start owning the fact that whether or not you get to have fun in BVSD doesn't have to relate to how money your parents pony up. So that's what I'm trying to get to. So I want the data and the information to be inclusive about it, I guess is what I'm saying.
This is a worthy ask and a complicated ask, as you know. And I would say that the first work that you have to do is you have to bring your booster clubs up to the 21st century, right? The idea that when I arrived here, that you still have the football touchdown club, the whatever, and that you have inequities that are raising dollars inequitably is a direct violation of Title IX. Hard stop, right? So that's one thing that you have to clean up, right? The second thing that we have to clean up is what can you charge? How much can you charge? Because right now, if you don't have real clear parameters around that, right, then you've got to get that. And then once you have that, then you have to dig into this societal issue, right, around AAU, and you've got to play for the club team to play for the team. And, I go to you need to get private lessons. You need to, there is a whole industry in this community thriving, right? Kids have speed coaches in middle, there is a whole industry around this topic that creates inequities. Right. And I'll never forget when I moved to Atlanta, my son was 3 years old. I said, oh, great time to start. Oh, he was starting kindergarten. I go, great time to start him in T-ball. He was 3 seasons too late to play any competitive sports in North Atlanta.
All right, keep going.
So, all right. I don't know. I got on the soapbox a little bit. But I just want to be clear. I hear where you're at in your spirit, and it's beyond the school district, some of this that our community needs to know and understand. And if we're not careful and looking at the whole thing, folks you could set the best policy and they'll figure the workarounds and we all know that'll happen. Okay.
But Jorge's got a thought?
Wholly in agreement. Just want to make sure this also includes elementary school level participation, after school programming, and that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Got lots of nodding. Okay.
So where do you want to put these? When do you want to talk about these, Kathleen? We got a whole slew.
2022, like 3 years ago. Oh, no. So anyway.
This isn't a time machine.
Kathleen, yay.
Do you want to hit it in September or August? Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it under policy for study. as a place, right, where like we can't talk about it forever. You could put it on study for multiple meetings if you want to, as our first set of 5 policies we'll be tackling. Does that sound okay for everybody? Why don't we start on August 27th? And I'm going to put these here. IGDE, IGDA-R, IGDG, IGDF, and IGDA.
I do love your alphabet soup on the policy names. It brings me joy.
Okay. All right. We're cooking.
All right. I'm mindful of the time and knowing that we have people who get sleepy where it's 8:30, so we should probably just keep clicking.
Okay. You're trying to. What's that? Oh, I put them on the wrong date.
Yep. All right. What do you got next?
CMAS results. Do you want those separate or do you want those in October 15th? Like they're timely. So when they come out, we typically do an information item like the following meeting because they've been in the paper and things like that. But it's an information item. We'll just run through the CMAS results, run through the performance framework results. It's been a rhythm. Folks count on it.
Which proposal?
I'm trying to think when does it come out?
The embargo ends in August, and so it would
Like
be-
September 10th?
Yeah, or September 24th, maybe if you wanted to have a little bit. Jonathan's team wanted a little bit more time to
No, I mean, it's a
digest.
regurgitation. He doesn't do any other analyses. I think September 10th is
Okay.
going to work. So, everybody okay with that?
Great.
All right. Committee to narrow legislative priorities.
We're on advocacy platform.
Yes. Well, yeah, no, these are the meetings with legislators. Then there's a meeting with like city councils. And then,
Great. So if we're going down our list, the next one at the top was advocacy platform to narrow down platform.
That's the policy platform. You just have it written funny on your.
Yeah.
so policy platform.
Sounds like right now.
And the conversations we had is get to it early, right? So, and you want to do it as a work session?
Is he nodding?
Just
Work
staring
session?
at everybody's
Feels
eyes.
worky.
Reading the room.
Right. I'm counting nods.
So then August 13th? Or is that too early?
It's fine to some. Can we live with that? So is it in time to inform? Okay.
Well, let's just get at it, right? Let's get at it on the 13th. We'll talk about our hope streams. And there was a question whether, to advocacy platform, and do we want to decide if there's a committee and some working on that? Like, why don't we have that conversation on the 13th? All right, we're cooking.
All right.
Meetings with legislators, which is somewhat aligned to that, but you have to have your platform before you meet with legislators.
Okay.
And if you meet with them too early, they can tell you yes to everything, even if they're going to vote no.
And they forget.
No, they don't forget. They just pretend. So, right, the first meeting. And now this, we had it in January last time. Do you all want to do it earlier?
So what would you
You
recommend?
tell me when you all want to have this.
Melania?
Why not, when we do this narrowing down of platform, then we decide how to reach out to legislators then? Is it soon enough if we decided in August?
We should probably get Tanya and Heather to weigh in.
Oh, right.
And that's a little bit what I was gonna say. I've seen other school boards during CASB meet with their legislators down there when it's convenient to their legislators. And so I was thinking kind of right around before the semester ends, but after the elections, we have a better understanding. So sometime in December.
And this may be a one-off meeting depending upon availability, so it might not necessarily fit on the board. Like I can't say, oh, we're going to meet with them Tuesday between like you have to do a little, like, so are we thinking After the election?
I think that makes a lot of sense, just from
But
our
not
historical
in
experience.
December. Couldn't we be, yeah, couldn't we be in November still?
To meet with people, they've got to show up. Right. So that's a tricky part about this. We've scheduled the perfect dates before and literally had Tammy's story and 30 chicken dinners in here. And Tammy was great, that session, but it didn't help us at all because folks wouldn't show up.
So aspirationally, what I hear is after the election, but in November to the best of our ability, and see what shakes out when you start reaching out to people. Is that fair?
It's a pretty tall order to fill. I'll just be
I
honest.
said it was aspirational.
I think December makes more sense,
Okay.
and I don't know that it makes that as much sense. Like I think that we can shoot for December. I'm going to give this to you, Laura. This is not going on the board until you have it planned. You have permission to plan something in December.
Jorge had a thought before we move on, and then Nicole.
No, I was gonna say this is like where we go to them sort of thing, right?
Yeah, what we do is we try to meet up with our delegation.
Right, okay.
Right. Now, once we have the platform figured out, right, we can start pushing that. We don't have to wait. So you can push that. We could push it at CASB. We could push the meeting, but this is the, hey, look, delegation, you're on the hook for A, B, C, D, or E. Thank you to the several legislators that helped us last session. For those who didn't, here's what's happened because, right, you were so, looking to support something that I told you wasn't going to be good for us. Here's what's happened to us.
Nicole and then Alex.
And that's exactly what I was gonna say. If we have the platform teed up, we can send that out and we can, push for things that we might like in a way that's not this formal meeting to talk about what is actually happening and how that is directly impacting us. So those two things can happen if we get our platform cleared up. So exactly what Rob just said is what I raised my hand for.
Well, and I would just add, in a perfect world, all the candidates who are competing with each other promise to do the thing we want them to do anyway. So if we come out of our earlier meeting with our asks figured out, then there's all sorts of ways to let people know so that no matter how it fits into their calendar.
Rock on. And Laura's gonna take that one out. Excellent. Charter school?
We have 9 more. I've got student conduct policies, search and interrogation.
Interrogation by law enforcement.
Student-
That's what that's.
Yeah.
Okay. And so this was a pretty high priority.
Yep.
Do I have that right?
Yep.
What do you think?
I think in my mind, those policies don't require extensive discussion, but I may be missing something here. They were the last 2 policies that we did not update in 2020 when we updated all of the student discipline and conduct policies because we had a lot of things happening at the time that involved those 2 policies. So I feel like those could be accomplished pretty easily on a regular sort of policy cycle. So maybe by mid-September, we could do those.
Nicole?
No, I would agree. And I had thrown these out because they were from the 80s and they did not relate well to all of the updated JR policies. I don't think they will take extensive discussion because so much is dictated by law, but it's important for them to be aligned with all that really important work.
You want to
that
pull the
was trying to be
policies and then we'll, okay. Okay.
Okay, and you put it in September?
September 24th, and we'll get those exact policies so everybody will know. Okay, charter school oversight. So this, if this is a board, we need to do this earlier rather than later because we have a charter school that if we're going to be touching the policy or changing what we want to do, we want to get ahead of that cycle. Peak to Peak is scheduled to renew their charter next year. So you're going to want to do this early. If we had time, I would say before we leave, if you're willing to stick it out on we're just gonna need some direction on what you all want to do with this, right? In regards to charter school oversight. I know some board members have pretty specific thoughts.
I have a question. So LBD was updated just before the pandemic. So is it LBD and the reg? Is it
So, because I was on the DAC when
Here, you
the
can put those
DAC
on
gave a
there.
lot of recommendations on the updating of LBD. What we had recommended at that time also was the reauth process. Is it just the reauth of this, or is it like we're looking at all of it, not just the reauthorization? That's the part I want board member clarification on, because that work is more or less involved depending on if we're good with what the parts that were updated and we just want to finish the work that wasn't done, or if we're opening it all up.
Alex, you have a thought?
Yeah, I'm interested in opening it all up. I think there's things to do with reauthorization of new schools that are good, but there's also things in the annual oversight that are we're out of compliance with state law. There's issues in how to move forward that affect open enrollment and affect students with disabilities. And there's a way to do that in a way that gets all the schools on board without threatening them. So I don't want a narrow discussion of it. I'm hoping that we also come out with it with actually a model policy for the state to share with others that commits us to doing best practice in authorizing. As someone who's observed it a lot, I think we have a lot of really strong practices that other districts have modeled on here. So it's not like we're starting from scratch, but I'd really like to get us to a point where we're not just trying to make incremental changes in order to think about the next reauthorization.
So based on that,
I'm just trying to think, what's the scope of that work? How long would that take to do? Who are we committing to do the work? And it just depends on where we place it. Right? So
additional thoughts? Folks generally agree with Alex or have a different perspective? Melania?
When you say who are we committing, are you talking about Kathleen's time?
it's Kathleen's time, it's staff's time. Like, to the extent that you do these big changes, are we going to be asking DAC to take a look at these things? Right? Like, typically when we've touched these things, DAC has been involved. Is this a priority for DAC? Or is this just, we're going to do this, we're going to button it up, and this is what we're going to do? I just think the way that you want to engage depends on how long it will take and how much staff time it takes.
And that was my follow-up question. When we did this work last time, we engaged NACSA or CACSA. Like, it was really, so I'm just trying to, having been through that other process, I'm trying to understand along with you, like, are we engaging others, or is it just the board and staff?
So a trip down memory lane, my first semester here, I learned that we didn't have a strong authorization process pretty quickly, got some poor advice. We brought in NACSA. I didn't really understand there was a CACSA when I did it. I phoned a friend in an emergency. Hey, who can you help me? We work with NACSA. We brought NACSA in, and their first thing was to get our application process up and running. This was the second phase of work, and then the pandemic hit, and we just we just closed out the PO. Right. So, but again, that takes a lot of time, and you can't bring in an outside organization who's not going to partner with staff inside. So I'm not understanding the full scope of the work. We can give it a go. We can start it early and see how far we get. If there's a time limit, though, to things that you'd want to implement before the next charter school goes through the contracting process, we would need to know that, and we'd need to time staff accordingly. So
Hold on one second. I'd love to hear just a couple more perspectives on this, because I think we've heard from two people. So, Lelania?
it starts next year, right? I mean,
Yes, so Peak to Peak will be up for review next year, and Summit's the following year. And the way the review process starts is that we typically ask the charter school for a renewal application. I think that it's December 1. So if I could offer a thought on timing, I think I would recommend that the board consider the policy, a state of the policy, and a discussion about the revisions the board would like to see. I think it'd be really important to do that early, like August, even if it means bumping the athletic fees just a little bit deeper into the school year. I think that the LBD, this charter school work, involves fewer staff than the athletic activity fees work. And if the board would like to influence the renewal application you're going to see in December, then we would need to do it early.
Love to hear
And for me, I'm most keenly interested in what Kathleen says regarding timing, and I sounds good to me.
Jorge, Jason?
I'm in agreement on the timing. I think that makes a lot of sense. I just make sure we also include the DAC as part of this policy discussion and any relevant groups.
And I think Kathleen started to talk about what that scope might look like for that early conversation.
So I'm going to leave this up to Kathleen. If you start this here, where does this need to go? Like, this is August 27th, so that's back to back. That's two big old chunks. You'll have these for study. You might need to bring these back for study, and then you'd have a massive amount. Do we want to push these out to the end of October?
Yes, that's.
Is
what
that
we
a,
wanna
is that
do
a
with
change that
those.
the board would be willing to do to be able to get this charter school stuff under the wire?
What's the these for those of us who can't see teeny tiny things?
This is student activities fees. This is not the, just to be clear, this is not the work around the booster clubs. That work is happening as a directive, right? A management directive versus a policy, and that we wouldn't be able to get this until October, or October 22nd. And then we could dig in if the board is good with that. And then that gives us three big old chunks of policy, Kathleen. It gives you charters, it gives you the fees stuff, and then it gives you the searches and that's a quickie, right? So that's not hard, but then that gives you big chunk, couple, gives you spaces that out a little bit. If everybody's okay with that, I think that's what I'd recommend.
Anyone troubled by that?
Okay. All right. We are cooking. Title IX sexual violence prevention. I think that, the question I'd have for the board is this in addition to the previous conversations that we've had around Renee Crown? Is this is this collecting more data? Is this, what do we already do? Like, what does this look like? And whose was this? It was, I think it's Lelania's. So.
Have we covered it with the other items, or is this a new item?
I just want to make sure that we see the results of Renee Crown's.
Okay. And so right now we have that November 19th. So we're okay there. And it's a topic that is certainly top of mind for us. Okay. Donations, policy KH. I believe this was Kitty's.
Kitty's not here, but we don't throw out our ideas just because she's not feeling well. Right, does anyone?
Well, Kitty's brought this policy up on multiple occasions on her time on the board, thinking that folks should, if they're paying for personnel, that they should give a larger percentage to schools that need. Right now it's at 10%. Like, if, not to speak for Kitty, but knowing Kitty, and I know that she's brought this specific topic up before. So to the extent that we'd want to have that conversation around donations, policy KH, I almost feel like, Kathleen, don't get too mad at me. I almost feel like it's part of this conversation. Well, because it's this idea of equity, right? Like, could you put that on the 22nd?
Yes,
Is that the one?
no.
Everyone comfortable with that? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm very sympathetic to this, and I guess the other issue I've observed, and I don't remember if Kitty's been, this is part of her trajectory on it, is just looking at the personnel stuff as the part that's shared doesn't capture some of the scale of some of the other investments that are being made. So I would say not just increasing the amount, but increase the application of the amount.
Well, that will be for yours to discuss on October 22nd. All right, we've got 5 more things to go. Here we are doing well.
Can I
Sorry.
ask sorry. Can I ask a question?
Yes.
On October 20, so that's a lot. I actually think we're going to be spending a long time discussing those policies. What does it say under study on the yellow? Way at the bottom of your board on the same date. I'm just
That's
trying to-
Board of Director District Review. Why is that there?
Oh, we have to. Yeah.
Could you bump it though? Like, when does that have to be done by? That's a good notice, Nicole.
I don't
didn't
think
see
that state law establishes that date. I think it requires that we do it regularly, and it needs to be done in time for the next election, which would be the subsequent year.
So we could even move it to next semester.
We might be able to. I need to research that, though. I'm not sure.
But it doesn't, it probably doesn't have to be on that particular day, so we can
No.
put it in Kathleen's gonna research it.
All right, I just messed this thing up.
There you are.
What did I mess up here, Laura? When are grad requirements? We're doing grad requirements.
You had grant requirements on the 12th, or on the October 22, I think.
To present.
Yep, and then you were going to do study and then action on the 12th and then the 10th.
Study on the 12th?
Yep.
No, study on the, well, then we still have that, so we can land that. And then the Board of Director district review would be study on the 10th. And then action would be just to be determined, because it'd have to be in January. So you still have on the 12th. So then, okay, so I did get it right.
Okay.
Because we have the grad requirements, we didn't move those. We moved the study from the 22nd, and I just bumped it like till the 10th.
Nicole's got a comment.
So I just want to make sure that if changes to those director districts occur, we have all of that wrapped up well before people are going to start pondering whether they're going to run for reelection or run for election, probably after the holidays. It's pretty typical that in the second semester, people are thinking through. So any changes would need I just say that because the earlier the better, because it will be on the heels of an election cycle for the boards. I don't want to push it out to the subsequent semester or too late, because if we need to start preparing for the elections in 2025, people need ample notice. And if we have to redraw because of changes in population, to have that distributed adequately, our public really does need to know there are 3 board seats that would be in that situation.
But first meeting in January to approve, I think we're okay, right?
One has secondary meeting date for this study item being November 12th. And I can find out from him what price. If there's a mandatory.
Tell him we said December 10th in the beginning of January and see what he says.
Leadership.
There you go. All right. So this is rigorous content for secondary students.
Who wants this one? Anyone recall? Alex?
It may be coming for me, and it is sort of perhaps captured as a grad plus follow-up and update, but it's also how are we making sure that we are not gatekeeping our kids out of the content?
Sure. I think this may show up in our data review as we think about advanced coursework, things like that. Let's see how that comes out on the 20th on the data calendar. And if not, it's something we could review on the 24th, if you're okay with that. Okay. All right. Grading policy. Yeah, I don't think you could touch this. I mean, like, this is a big old sacred cow. Go ahead.
No, and this was mine, and I threw it up there, because when I throw things out there, it's just, hey, this is on my radar, and I do not want to touch this while we have opened up contracts. So I think there's a high degree of inconsistency. I think it is a sacred cow, and I want to be really mindful of the timing in which we talk about it, with contracts being opened and graduation requirements being discussed and all the things. I am fully in support of that, just waiting and at the will of the board. But that was my thinking when I threw this one out there, that there is work and now is not the time for that.
So, but on the board, right? It's still prioritized. We'll keep it right there. Supporting SACs. Alex, I believe this was yours.
Yeah, I was just, always impressed by what our DAC does and by how strong some of our SACs are. And then I know that not all of them are. And I do think when we think about lots of different things we're trying to drive change on, it would be great if we could expand the number of SACs with capacity to be engaged. And I don't know what the district action is to do on this. I think it maybe gets into the work of your teams, working with, different schools. But I'd love to figure out how to not have so many schools without a SAC or not a very well functioning one.
Here's what I've done since I've been here. When we did weighted differentiated funding, I said, if you don't have a SAC, you get no money. Right? So we stood up more SACs, right? I don't know that they were high functioning. Right. And I don't know that I have the bandwidth or the capacity or the ability to go around and see whether or not SACs are high functioning or not.
I know as I left the DAC last year and taken on by Chris since then, they've done a big survey of their SACs and DACs to see how they're doing. I'd like to wait to hear from them to see kind of what they're proposing as next steps and kind of what they found out. And I know we don't have on the schedule there when we meet with the DAC and they do their updates, or we do.
We have the DAC UIP update, and then we will have to fill in when they come. I mean, we typically have done that as a work session topic, right?
Twice a year at the start of, roughly around the start of each semester.
We can do it on the third. Well, I don't know if they're going to be ready on the 13th, or we're going to be ready for them on the 13th. We could do the 27th. We could do 27th or September 10th. How about September 10th? I'm sorry, I'm looking at both former DAC chairs. Just meeting with DAC is the topic.
Yeah, I think their first meeting September is the first Tuesday in September.
So that's right after that. So that's that. Or would it be the first Tuesday? It'd be right after Labor Day. You think they're going to meet?
Yeah, they usually meet.
Okay, so that's September 10th. And we will call that.
What are we calling that?
Meeting with DAC.
Meeting with DAC? Yeah, go ahead.
And I was going to second Jorge's thinking around this. We do need to hear from them what they need help with. It could be really simple, like, hey, when you approve the DAC membership list, which we would also have to do in that meeting, can share the calendars for each individual SAC, or it could be something really simple and it could be something more complicated, but I would really like to hear what they need help with before we dedicate a high degree of time trying to solve a problem for them. So I really appreciate that.
And we can have any conversation we want to with DAC at that time. So board members, if Alex, you want to say, hey, what can we do to support? I think that works.
Did you have a follow-up thought? Are we good? Okay. Fantastic. Kathleen?
We have to vote on director districts before December 31st.
Okay.
Sorry, I'll know that answer next time.
So we can go, we just have to do this then. We just have to double up.
December 10th. All right.
We'll have to double up. We can not do a work session if we want to cross that out to give us more time. If you all are good with that, I can eliminate the work session. So then we just have information items. We can eliminate work session here. That way we can get through the study, and then the action's just on the, as long as we do the good work on study, actions, piece of cake. Does that work? All right. Two more things. Sponsorships, KHB-R, and I think this is Nicole's.
Do you want to remind us what it is?
Our policies, and compared to other districts, feel more limiting in our ability to access sponsorship dollars. We travel around the state and visit other folks' athletic facilities. They have a lot of sponsorships that can be related to sport and related to healthy things. And if we can be strategic in accessing those dollars, it takes some pressure off of our general fund dollars, which are going to be really precious to us moving forward. So I think that was my rationale for making sure that we can explore those in our community with greater ease in light of our fiscal situation.
Urgency?
Make a recommendation. We can lump them on to October 22nd, which is your favorite day in policy. And we can do one of two things. We can take the work session for all the policies, or cancel the work session and just talk to them about them and study? What do you think, Kathleen?
I think those policy heavy sessions that coming before public comment feel really long. So I'd just study it later in the meeting.
But then we could cancel out the work session because the work session is really going to be study
Right.
as we talk about study. The dynamics will be different. You'll be having the discussion from the dais as long as you all are okay with that. I think that works.
I think that's best. And that is, these are magnets and this day is going to be really, really heavy and long. I just want everybody to know.
Why don't I do this? Why don't I lighten the load a little bit and move UPK over to October 8th? How does that feel, everybody? Okay, thank you very much. And then last thing, homework policy.
Whose idea is this?
We keep getting, we hear about it.
I do think it goes with this.
It does sort of.
And they could both come together. And we leave those on the prioritization because it's really an 18-month run anyways, right? Like you could, if the board chooses to prioritize that in early 25, right? We could start talking about it, have a year runway, get it approved and go in place the next year.
Yes.
Yeah, I think grading and homework go hand in hand.
That was the this he pointed to. That's.
Sorry. Okay.
All right. Yep. Laura's got a thought.
I have a quick thought. October 8th, I just want to make sure that it's not super heavy because on October 9th, we have the showcase.
Nope, we're good.
Okay.
Super light.
Beth was suggesting everyone just sort of take a minute. And if you need
Why don't you all come up and admire the board in
to
person?
look at it, and
You
if
can
something
look
doesn't
at it.
fit,
You can, your favorite items, you can,
have a moment. Right.
If you want to see all the policies we've done and how magically we've been pulling from out of a hat, you could see our policy board on the back where we've identified policies that we want to eventually get rid of, ones we reviewed, ones that we need to review. And Kathleen will sprinkle these in as bandwidth exists and as urgency exists, right? If there's a law that changes, she'll be bringing those forward. So those aren't necessarily for the board to prioritize. Those are for staff to prioritize to make sure that we're in compliance with law.
And that's actually what I was just conferring with Kathleen about. We did have a conversation about not wanting meetings that were too light. And I was just talking to Kathleen about her list of policies she needs to get through that may not be really exciting for us. And so just to float that idea, because there are some dates, August 27th, or, that look light, there is still a lot of work we have to do that this will fill up really quickly. And we might want to have those optional breathers because some of these days are really heavy.
Was there a question for the board in that? Or just?
No, just because we did talk about not having really light meetings, I just wanted to put that asterisk out there because it appears light. It doesn't mean that there's not, I know a lot of
Got
these
it.
finance policies the finance chapter is looking at some updates
Yes.
that could easily slot in depending on everything else that Kathleen has to do. So there are still some, I just don't want that notion that we should maybe just cancel that meeting because there's nothing there.
It's not as easy. It's not as light as it looks. Got it. Board members, now that you have a minute to sit with it, anyone troubled? Any requests or suggestions for change? What are we whispering about?
And for November 19th, this is tentative, right?
What was that one?
That's the Renee Crown review report.
Oh,
Right.
And if it's here, great. If it's not here, if it's not done by then, we're just gonna have to find a time.
Shift around. Mhm.
Yep.
All right. Feeling good? Was it more fun than you were expecting? Right?
Really good.
Super fun. Excellent. Rob, any last thoughts for the board?
Well, number one, I appreciate your confidence and faith in me to allow me to navigate you through what I think for some of you was a stressful process, but hopefully now that you've been through it, you know and understand that it's really a collaborative process where I think everybody's opinions and thoughts are valued and accepted and prioritized. And it gives us a really great look on how to get a lot of things done in a limited amount of time. And that's kind of why this process, I feel like, has made us one of the most productive boards that I know. We don't do a lot of spinning. We have this moment, and then we know what we need to do, and we set the stage. And now that we even have this 24th moment, I think it's a fail-safe if something else comes up. I mean, you still have some space on October 8th. You could kick something to. You still have some space on November 19th if that doesn't come through. So you still have a little bit of built-in space after that works. And so, this was a lot more fun than me doing it by myself and then us changing it around, Heather. I don't know.
So fun. And several of you have heard me say this, but I brag about Rob's board to like every city council that I ever work with. And I'm like, so how do you manage your schedule? We don't. I'm like, can I tell you about Rob's board? Because it's awesome. And it's awesome for exactly this reason, because we can flex and the magnets make it really adaptive to things as they arise. So thank you for just being you. Nicole, any final thoughts for your colleagues on the board?
Well, one thing, the personnel and bond contracts on the 25th, they shouldn't be there because we're probably not going to meet then. We can just slide those over. On June 25th, sorry. And my final thoughts are, this is not substantially different than the way we've done in the past with the moving magnets, but I really hope board members felt like they were heard, that they have a higher degree of trust in this process, that it doesn't feel like an enigma, and that there is an understanding of hows and whys things get spaced out and kind of thinking through that. So I hope everybody leaves here today feeling better than they did when they arrived and has more faith in the process than they did before we went through it.
Thanks. Anyone else? Last thoughts? Let's go to the order. Everyone want to go home? Fantastic. Thank you all very much. Thanks for including me. You did great. Absolutely. You betcha. Happy to help.